take it and I tend to edit it and clean it a little bit,
Yep.
but it saves me 70% of the work. And so instead of doing 100% of the note taking during the meeting and after the fact, I'm doing 30% after the fact. It's definitely a time saver there. There's a couple other places where it's been good.
And set this up. And then we are live, so whenever you are ready.
All right, cable knows we're ready.
We're ready, Roger.
Roger, we're ready.
Yep.
All right. So, love technology. All right. So welcome to the Berlin Select Board open meeting. Today is March 17th. Happy St. Patrick's Day and happy almost spring. Just a reminder that open session meetings are being recorded and your image and voice will be forever and ever somewhere on YouTube. Calling the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. So before we scoot away to executive session, but we will be back, I'd like to
Yep.
turn the floor over to my colleague, Mr. Hawkins.
I just want to say for folks, I am on call at work today, which could make life kind of exciting if I have to leave the room. I believe all my alerts except for work-related ones are silenced. So instead of staring at my phone, it might make a noise, but if it makes a noise, I'm likely to have to look at it. I do have 20 minutes to get to somebody if they have problems, but
You couldn't call yourself.
I didn't.
No worries. We'll stop as needed
We've
for you.
been pretty good, which is probably the kiss of death of I've been on call before during select board meetings, so it's been okay.
Okay, all right. So we are going to enter into executive session. We'll come back before our appointments. If we have time, we'll blow through the meeting. But to read it, the board will enter into executive session under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Exception 2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, police chief and fire chief, and Exception 3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation, a workers' compensation settlement, and will return to open session to further conduct its regular business meeting. So, Mr. Hawkins?
I think you just have to say aye to that, right? Or do I have to make a formal motion? Anyway, I am fine going into executive session.
All right, so,
Moken,
Yes.
but I will move and go to executive session.
and I will second that. All in favor?
Hawkins, aye.
Stone eye, roll call vote to go into executive session. Say aye again.
Aye.
And Stone eye, thank you for your patience. We'll be back.
Oh,
Scott?
Mike was very quiet.
Scott?
Oh.
Quiet?
and I wasn't super far from the mic.
No, I know. I came in here to like yell at you, get closer to the mic, but it's really close. I don't know why. It's so quiet. Correct.
And general public comment? No, I don't see any.
Right? 7A.
Carnival, because that's at 7.
Can't do any of the public hearings because they're time certain.
well,
I would love to go to 7B if we could while the chief is here, because then he could explain
7C.
exactly what that's about. See, I'm sorry.
7C.
7C.
So
A vote of the-
Fire Mike, if you could come on down and talk to us about disclosures submitted from Fire Mike and Fire Lieutenant Mr. Polino regarding travel for town purposes.
Yes. So, as many of you are aware of, we ordered a new ambulance probably about 3 years ago, prior to my arrival of getting here as fire chief.
Mine too.
That ambulance is now completed. They've completed the construction of it, and we need to go down to do the final inspection on it at the factory. So that's gonna involve us going through. We have basically a page list of about 80 pages that just goes through the entire construction of the truck. We'll go through all of the cabs, all of the cabinets. We'll actually get underneath the truck, look to make sure that the frames are the size they're supposed to be. We'll look at the engine, the alternator, the batteries, make sure they're exactly what we spec'd out and what they're supposed to put in. So that'll be a 2-day process that we'll do, leaving tomorrow and then coming back on Thursday. And
And where are
then
you going?
it's just south of Orlando in Winter Park, I believe is the name of it. It's either Winter Park or Winter Haven, Florida.
Let me check the Red Sox.
This is allowable because there's a benefit to the town.
Right, it was included in the original contract
Yes.
of it.
Are you driving it back when it's ready or do they ship it
No,
back?
they will actually ship it back. Actually, one of the things they're doing with that truck, believe it or not, is that truck is going to go to a conference in Indianapolis called FDIC, which is the Fire Department International Conference. It's a week-long expo and seminar for educational purposes with classes and shows. And that truck is going to be on display there for Wheeled Coach. They're actually going to have that truck there. And I believe one of the other things that's in there is they want to fly myself and Lieutenant Polino out there to be the subject experts for the truck, to be able to explain what the truck is, how it was built, what we spec'd on that truck. And it'll actually be out there. There'll be thousands of firefighters from across the world that'll actually be there, and that truck's going to be there as a demonstration truck for them to showcase.
And it will say Town of Berlin.
Yes, it will be lettered up just like our current red ambulance we have now that says Berlin Fire and EMS on it and stuff. And they'll have a sign there and stuff with it, thanks to the town of Berlin for that truck being there. So they'll give recognition for it.
So we expect
Opening
pictures.
applications for people
Yes.
to apply for jobs. and
That
stuff.
I will, yes, I will be recruiting.
Because if you don't like the heat in the summer, you can have the snow in the winter.
That's right.
Well, you can have the heat in the
Indianapolis
summer here in the
is
same
obvious.
day.
Yeah.
Mhm. And you've got coverage. I can't, this is too close.
I know.
Yeah.
And you've got coverage
Yep.
while you and John are gone.
Yep, we have coverage. I've reached out. Captain Tony Alissi will actually be available for the next 3 days. He'll be in and out of the station and stuff to cover calls and questions from the public and anything that comes up. Abby will contact him with any questions, and obviously I'll be available by a cell phone for him if he needs anything. I've also reached out to our mutual aid partners and stuff just to let them know that I'll be gone, so they'll be listening as well in case there is a major incident. They'll be coming right away to assist our officers that are going to be backfilling on that and stuff to help them in any way they can.
Okay. I'm fine. with it. Do you
I'm
have
fine. I don't have any
questions?
questions.
All right, do you want to make a motion?
I'd make a motion to approve the disclosure, to approve you going to both of those events in Florida and Indianapolis.
Thank you.
And I will second it. And all those in favor? Aye. Safe travels.
Thank you.
Come
Appreciate it.
back. All right, we have 7 minutes, so how about 7B? To
Yes.
admin role, how to support staff that reports up to
Yeah,
elected positions.
7B is the nebulous one. I think it's from what my comments were before is
Is it-
both, they want me in the microphone and not look that direction. So as I look at Kristen,
Don't.
Just,
how there are employees of the town that don't report through the select board or the town administrator. I think it's town clerk, highway department, and assessor's office being the ones that come to mind. Sorry, did I say highway? Sorry, I didn't mean to say highway. It's because Fred's out there.
Oh, okay.
Clerk, assessor,
Health.
and Board of Health, yes. Are the ones that don't report through. And I understand that obviously on legal and human resources matters, they work with you, Kristen. I'm just trying to make sure that when citizenry have questions about some of those committees, that it's those committees and those personnel who are responding and not you, because I think what it turns out is, and I've seen it in some of the emails we've gotten, is like the town administrator said, the town administrator I've sent this to, and some people are sending you things that you have no say over or control over. And so I'm trying to figure out how we get you out of some of that mess.
I thought about this since it was on the agenda, and also it does tie in with one of my goals that I planned to work on more once all of the town meeting budget and warrant were squared away. And one of the things that comes to mind are almost every time I have a discussion with Labor Council, they recommend a change to the town administrator bylaw. They say it's a great bylaw to start with, but there are some inherent contradictions and there are some areas that it would make sense to strengthen. And there are some clauses that are separate but related, but they're in different parts of the bylaw. And their recommendation, there are certain things that I actually have to run by them to confirm that I have the authority to do, because it's a bit vague in the TA contract. So one of the things I was thinking and, was working with council, the Board of Health, Board of Assessors, to see if they would be interested in talking about at least the human resources function coming under the select board, because we ran into an issue today, even just with hiring, where there's confusion about who gives out the hiring packet. And when you're an elected versus an appointed group, sometimes the elected groups have done it on their own, but we have a whole process of, we post in our office, we get the candidates, we pass them along. And then once somebody is recommended, it goes to the treasurer collector's office. And so we're almost having to run different processes. As much as we try to get everybody on the same page, it's been a challenge. So I think those conversations would be helpful to have. I also think having council work on it and give us some of the recommendations from what they've seen. And this has come from John Foskett when I was speaking to him the other day. He says anytime he, Liz, Anne Marie, or Eric have to look at that, the TA bylaw, they see things that they're like, ooh, that could be a little bit stronger. So I think that might help clear up some of this as well.
And we are still working on the original TA bylaw.
Yep.
Like it was written before we had someone, and we're a good 6 years
6
into it
years,
now, to
yeah.
now. So it's
18, I think it was
Yeah,
passed
so-
in, so 7, yeah.
so it's probably worth putting on an agenda at some point to start the process of looking at the new TA bylaw. And-
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and we know too that there's a ton of policies and procedures that need to be updated as well. So when we are three, I think it will be a good time to grab low-hanging fruit, take care of the ones, like the remote policy or the remote work policy, things that have immediate impact, the TA bylaw, see what we can do. But
Yeah. Speaking of remote, that's another one that's challenging too, because we do have a number of elected boards that meet remotely exclusively. So we're doing our best to communicate out that as of March 31st, remote ends, in the sense of you have to have a physical quorum in the room now.
Yep.
It did pass the
House is
today.
going to
They're
the Senate.
hoping it's going to pass
Yep.
the Senate, but there could be a gap between when
Correct.
that gets passes and when the current COVID procedures,
And
lapse.
unfortunately,
So-
because we don't have a remote policy, we cannot make any type of accommodations, things like that for someone who needs to have a hybrid.
Right, and well, it does allow some of the members to be present online as long as you have a
Have
physical
quorum,
quorum
yeah.
in the room.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, you know what? I think for now, probably we'll limp along as much as possible and push back. I mean, to Board of Health, to assessors, that they're in their roles, their elected roles, to take accountability and responsibility and stop.
Right.
And then we'll take a look at the TA bylaw and see what and what cannot be changed. But now that we know that there's something in here, we'll figure it out.
Well, and I'll be more careful too, I think, with my guidance, which is really only getting involved if there's a legal matter that
Yep.
needs to go to town council, because they can't, the elected boards can't authorize use of town council. It does have to go through the town administrator. But I think in saying, okay, here's the recommendation from town council, now go back to your board and
Correct.
have your board put out the statement, as opposed to saying that it's coming from the town administrator.
Thanks,
is
Roger.
probably a better approach.
Okay,
So I'll make sure to be mindful of that as well.
okay. All right. Well, if we drag along enough,
I was wondering if 7A was a 1-minute thing or not. I didn't see much in the folder except
It is.
okay.
so,
If it's longer, then we don't have to say anything more now until we.
Oh, that, no, 7A is a little bit longer
Okay,
than that,
that's fine.
unfortunately.
oh,
Oh.
yeah, that is gonna take a little bit. I have 6:59,
Yeah,
so,
we can start.
you know, if we want
Do you wanna-
to slowly
Well,
talk about the hearing that we have at 7 o'clock for a special event application submitted by John Flynn of Fiesta Shows to host a carnival down at the Solomon Pond Mall parking lot between April 24th and May 4th. And bang, we're at 7 o'clock. So you like that, huh? Can read slowly. So thank you for coming. Appreciate you
you.
being here. So
Thank-
want to
thank
tell
you,
us a
members
little
of
bit
the
about it?
board.
Mhm.
I'm John Flynn. I am the Vice President of Dean and Flynn, doing business as Fiesta Shows out of Seabrook, New Hampshire. Here before you tonight to request permission to do an event over at the mall in the parking lot. There has been a modification since I initially put the permit in, and I have let Kristen know about it. Some type of a conflict, so we had to change the dates to April 10th to April 20th. So it will be a little bit earlier than what we originally had put in for.
right, but the same number of days.
Yes, same number of days, same hours, just different dates. And this would include amusement rides, games for kids, and some food booths. And naturally, based upon the approval from this board, we would then reach out to Bridget over at Neshoba Valley Boards of Health for health permits. We would go ahead through the inspectional services for the electrical licenses, arrange for police details, arrange for everything through the fire department for inspections of propane, the hoods for the friolators, that type of thing that they inspect, along with the State Department of Public Safety that would come out to inspect all of the devices.
And I know that you and Dee shared emails about previous concerns that we've had from
Yes.
residents regarding noise flowing over the field and traffic lights.
I can't keep children quiet when they're having a great time.
Mhm.
So there will be some
Mhm.
thrills and chills and screaming. But in terms of the sound system, there are some amplified systems on some of the devices, and those will all be turned off by 9 o'clock. So after 9, it will be sound free, which we do at Bolton Fair. We do it at a few other places that we do. And again, we're the Fiesta Shows that does Bolton Fair every year.
And then again, Kristen, we can make sure, or you as well, that if someone has a noise complaint, they don't get bounced between the police and Marlboro, our police, and the security at the mall. I mean, that used to be a complaint. I think the last couple of events, we've sort of clarified that, but so if someone did have a complaint, they know how to get a hold of the right person, and we can get to you and you can
I would
modify it.
prefer that everybody is given my number because I
Yeah.
can react instantly. I know in the past they've gone through the mall, or as you say,
Yeah.
it's like a 3-step process. I'd rather it comes directly so we can address it immediately.
Great. And if that's, we can give that number out as well to our police and fire departments, and they can share it with Marlboro. I also know Liz Kelly, as always, is willing if somebody, calls the mall, you both can connect as well. But I do like the idea of having that one person point of contact. I think that's solved a lot of the concerns that residents have had in the past.
I'm good.
I'm good. So I'll make the motion to support the Fiesta Shows from April 10th to 20th.
Correct.
Okay. At the Solomon Pond Mall.
Okay, can you make that contingent upon receiving all local and
Yeah.
state permits and inspections?
Continue to make sure all the permits are received, correct?
And I will second that motion. So all in favor?
Aye,
Aye. You're all set.
congratulations.
You're ready to roll.
Look forward.
Look forward to it.
Good being back in Berlin.
Yeah,
you go.
yeah.
It's been a long time.
Welcome back. Hopefully you'll have great weather and
And hopefully we well attended event.
I
if you
thought
can
the
figure out
weather
how I can get the rings on like the bottles, he could stop by.
Guaranteed good.
Yeah, that's him.
They do their best.
We have new sources of revenue if we can control the weather.
That's right.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Have a great night. Thank you, John. All right, next up at 7:05 is a notice of intent to appoint a part-time on-call transfer station new hire, Norman Rainville.
Okay, so this is a notice of anticipated town administrator employee appointment. It's actually through the Board of Health, but it is a transfer station employee. So we did the HR process for this, and it is a part-time on-call transfer station attendant. This individual does need to get some guidance from state ethics because they are also employed at Assabet. So we are in the process of confirming exactly what needs to be done there. So this would be conditioned upon passing a Corey check and the guidance from the state. This would be for Norman Rainville for a part-time on-call transfer station attendant.
I'm fine with it. I'd
Me
make a
too.
motion to approve the intent to appoint upon those two conditions to Norman Rainville for the part-time on-call transfer station.
I will second that. Any other discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you, Norman. We appreciate
Yeah.
you stepping up and hopefully all will go well. Look at that. We are 5 minutes ahead.
I know.
I was gonna
So,
say, I can do it in
well,
5 minutes.
you know, we're 5 minutes ahead, but it's certainly not going to cut time off of it. All right. So our next discussion is to discuss and talk about and maybe vote on the FY 26 budget, where Kristen is only going to give a portion of her TA report on the budget.
So I did what I called a budget summary / TA report. I can start with that, and I can certainly do that in less than 5 minutes.
Is there anything that you can share online for?
Absolutely. Just give me 1 second and I'll share it on Zoom. Is what I tried to do now that we have the final numbers from Berlin-Boylston Regional School District, was put together kind of a brief summary of where we are at and what the potential implications are in terms of the budget needing excess levy, potential debt exclusion. So I just wanted to walk everybody through that process quickly. Oh, let me make this bigger so you can actually read it. Hold on.
Can this all be posted along with all the budgets, other information that's
Yep.
out on the web so that people can see it?
Absolutely.
And when we
It's too
get
big.
into the budget too, I have something I prepared for today that after you see it, think it's worthy of posting. You
Okay.
might want to post it too.
Okay, hopefully that's a little bit easier to see. It's still a
That's
little
obviously
small.
before the meeting. I can't run. the
Correct, we
chart
can't.
for you.
We can't have a chitty chat. Mhm.
So, okay, here we go. So on Tuesday, March 11th, the Berlin-Boylston Regional School District voted on their final FY 26 budget. What I have done is incorporated their revised numbers into the overall budget for the town, excluding capital for BMS and Tohoto. I have also subsequently removed the free cash estimate that was put into the budget to offset the capital expenses. What I had done was just done a carryover match from last year, which was the 297,000, but obviously that is way off when you look at that. So these are both unknown at this time, as capital is going to meet again on Thursday. And the FinCom Select Board and School Administration is going to be meeting Wednesday evening to discuss the school budget, including capital, which I will get into in a moment. So just to give folks an idea of where we are at and where we started from, we always start with an estimate of new growth plus Prop 2.5, which basically means a 2.5% over taxes that we raised in FY 25. So the new growth estimate that the assessor is comfortable with is low. It's 200,000. We don't have really any new development on the horizon. So based on her statistics and forecasting, that is the number she is most comfortable with. When you add that in with the 2.5 increase, you get about 578,000 in new funds that would be available for FY 26. The town portion of the budget represents about 50% of the new funds to the town, or about 289,000. And as you'll see below, as presently submitted, the town administrator version of the budget does fall under this threshold, just barely, now representing a $288,235 increase over FY 25. A couple of really important things, though, to note about that $288,000 increase. Over 150,000 of this increase comes from Worcester Regional Retirement and Chapter 32 Health, Dental, Life Insurance Benefits. So it's $82,966 for our mandated increase for the Worcester Regional Retirement Pension System, and that is non-discretionary. We have to pay that. Health insurance, we do save a couple of spots traditionally for employees coming on and off the plan during the year. And I know that's something that plans to be discussed a little bit later on. But as the budget stands now, there is a $70,000 increase. There's also a substantial contractual increase in the police wages, which is $180,650, which is offset by reductions in other line items, including the HR, where we had set funding aside during the police union negotiations, legal, fuel oil, COA wages, data systems, and unemployment insurance. And one point to note is that the salaries for the police chief and the fire chief are still under negotiation. So when you look at the requested budget versus my recommended budget, I've made $73,166 in cuts from the original budget requests. The town increase, as I just mentioned, would be $288,235. The ASABIT increase, and they have already voted on this and actually sent us their assessment letter, is $163,965. The Berlin-Boylston operating increase is $570,992. And then there's an increase to the debt of $90,948. The reason that the debt is in there is we have traditionally taken that out of the operating budget as opposed to the capital budget, even though it is capital debt. So that increase is in there. I have left capital off for now because for right now, we're talking operating budget. We're not talking about free cash and capital. So the total increase to the operating budget would be $1,114,140. And as I mentioned, the district did approve this budget on March 11th, and they have sent us a draft assessment letter as well. So in order to meet all three of these pots of funding that are needed for the town, for ASABIT and for Berlin-Boylston, we would need to tap into an additional $534,290 in excess levy capacity for a total FY26 property tax increase of $1,102,203. That would leave approximately $720,000 in remaining excess levy capacity for future years. This is going to be my big caveat estimate section. And if June were here, she would remind me of that too. To estimate what a $1.1 million increase in the budget looks like when you look at your tax bill, which is what everybody is obviously concerned about, would be about $700. And that is based on, and these are the caveats, an FY25 tax rate, because obviously we don't know the 26 tax rate yet. That is based on an average single-family home value of $659,860. And the current year tax rate will change. The current year average single-family home price will change. And it also does not take into account any commercial devaluation, which would impact residential taxes due to the town's tax split rate. So you're looking, I would say, at a minimum of $700. It could be higher. As we saw this year, we were thinking we were closer to 7 to 8, and it came out to closer to 9. So it really, until we set the tax rate for FY26, there is no way to give a definite number of what that increase in taxes would look like. So I throw that out only as a guide and a reference point. It could go up, it could go down, and you have to also realize we are in a reval year. So we are revaluing homes in town. There's a 5-year cycle that the state requires us to do. And with the way the market has been going, people are going to see increases in the values of their homes. So if your home goes from the average of 659,000 to 750,000, you're paying more in taxes as well, just based on the value. But if everybody goes up, then we're in a bit of a better situation. So we'll see how the valuations all work out when we do the reval that the assessor's working on. That is an FY25 and 26 revaluation. So we will see those impacts in FY27. Free cash and capital. I am conservatively estimating $1.2 million in free cash. It's possible we could have a bit more. We have submitted it to the state and we are waiting for their confirmation. There are some items that didn't get fully closed out in FY24 that will come out of free cash in 24, and we will get it in 25 free cash. And a couple of those, there's an uncertainty as to how the state will handle those. So it's possible that we could see a little more than 1.2, but the only number that I'm comfortable going with is the lowest possible number right now, which is 1.2 million. So if we look at the Finance Committee's free cash policy, they do recommend expending no more than 30% of free cash funds for capital expenses, which if we're using the conservative estimate of 1.2 million in available funds, that amounts to approximately $360,000. And for reference there, we have $311,085 in free cash capital requests from the town. And as of right now, we have $1,662,563 in free cash requests from the Berlin-Boylston Regional School District. They have indicated that they recognize that funding needs to be spread over multiple fiscal years. And they have actually gone through and identified things that absolutely they feel need to be funded in FY26. And that totals just about $450,000. So the only reason I put the 1.6 million out there is because that is the number that was passed by the school committee on March 11th. So they could go to town meeting theoretically and ask for up to 1.6 million in capital. If that is the case, we are going to have to look at if we can get any of those costs to qualify for a debt exclusion, because obviously we do not have sufficient funding in free cash. As I mentioned before, this is why I kind of split everything into operating and capital. We do have sufficient excess levy capacity to cover the overage in operating. If it's a $1.6 million capital request that comes through, plus 311,000 from the towns, and we're looking at 1.2 million, obviously, in total free cash, of which we're only supposed to use 30%, but that is a guide. Then obviously we'd have to look at which expenses would qualify under a capital debt exclusion. So capital planning, as I mentioned, is meeting Thursday, and based on their recommendations, we'll know if a debt exclusion will be required for the capital items that exceed the available free cash as recommended by the committee. One thing I didn't get to mention last time we met that I did think was important to note, at their last meeting, the FinCom did vote on the Berlin-Boylston draft budget. They asked that they remain within a target operating and debt budget that did not increase the tax levy by greater than 3.5%. The budget obviously was in draft form. It has changed a little bit since then. That would mean another approximately, at that time it was 330,000, but Berlin-Boylston changed their budget, as have we. So that would basically mean another $385,059 in cuts from either side of the budget, town or school, in order to keep us within a 3.5% tax increase. So that is not what was obviously voted on by the schools, but I did want to point out that that was what the FinCom did recommend. So, the other thing I'm continuing to work on is the budget webpage, and, that is located on the homepage if anybody wants to take a look at it, and we're trying to keep that up to date and get information up there as we can. So that's my overview for you.
I wish we had a giant white, like, wall behind us that we could write on to make everything clear so that people could follow us. So I'm looking, this is what I have here that you probably can't see,
I can
Is-
bring that up.
is the
Right.
Berlin-Boylston Regional School that was presented on March 11th, which is and so if I just look at for Tohoto and for BMS, please tell them it's Berlin Memorial and not Berlin Elementary.
Okay.
That they're looking for the unhighlighted capital request of $684,400
Between the two.
between the two.
Six? I'm
Right,
sorry if
but
I got the
To
number
be
wrong.
Clear though, the Hunter one is for both towns. That's not the Berlin assessment.
Right, oh, okay, so you would have to divide that.
Right, so
Or-
if you do 2/3, 1/3, which is
Yeah.
very rough math, you get to, because Berlin Memorial was about 300,000, there's about 100,000 of that, or
Yeah.
150 that might go to it. And I must say that Peg and I both attended that meeting.
Didn't sit near each other,
yeah,
did not talk
But
to each
we also
other.
declared it as a
Correct.
meeting, so.
Yep.
I came away actually quite disappointed in that I thought the school administrator, they have in the handout, the administration had highlighted capital items that they thought weren't necessary in the current year, yet the school board still voted on approving all of them. Matter of fact, the school board voted on the entire budget without actually any commentary whatsoever.
You were correct.
Which just, I think the amount of time, we've spent more time at this meeting and FinCom talking about the school budget than the school board has done. And we have no say over it. At the end of the day, we have no say over the school budget. The school, that we have a yes or no. Where there's no sort of debates of numbers on the floor of town meeting. And so our role is yes or no on the school budget. Um,
What bothers me as well is when I look at, and they talked about cuts, they openly
Yep.
talked about cuts, that I'm thinking you're gonna spend over $200,000 in furniture, that this is the first year that I think anyone has ever learned about it. And you're gonna sacrifice teachers to do so.
Yeah, I mean, again, we have no say over how they
No,
allocate
agreed.
their dollars. And if I was on the school board, I would have asked some more questions. And so we're being critical. I think the school administration did a good presentation.
I absolutely agree with
I
that.
think they highlighted, I think he said several times in it, I think they're having a hard time finding places to cut, but acknowledges that they think this will be hard on the towns to do. I felt for an acknowledgement of that, which felt good. The numbers flowed, the sums added up. Some of the other problems we've had in previous years, were not there, including, because it's not in the administration. At the end of the day, the leadership has to lead. And I think that there were breadcrumbs left that unfortunately I don't think were taken up, and hopefully in the remaining 3 weeks we can. I ended up with my own sort of little chart that doesn't take out capital, because that's the number they passed, that included capital. And I did this, I took the entire budget for the town and put it into just 5 line items. Schools, police, fire, EMS, health insurance, all the other insurance and debt, basically numbers we can't touch, and then everything else.
Right.
And I've, proposed some cuts, some pretty horrendous cuts to try to get us into stuff. And if you look at that, the schools, which are half the budget, we can't touch, because it's on the schools. And I think I need to expand my thing to get my percentages up on my screen so I can see them.
While you're
But
doing
that-
that, Scott,
yeah,
if I could just
sure.
add the number, I couldn't get to my page. The number for those highlighted or non-highlighted items came to approximately 436,022 for capital.
What was that number again?
436,22. And that's ish. I was trying to
Yep.
figure out their percentage because they didn't break down the individual items, so I was playing with numbers.
And keep in mind with those two, they said that whatever doesn't pass, they're just gonna put it on it again
Right.
next year.
Well, and to be fair, a capital item, like if your roof is leaking, you don't replace it this year, just like in my house, if I can't afford it this year, I'm gonna try again
Correct.
next year.
Mhm.
But And so I think their original intent of that long capital list was, these are things that we probably should be addressing at some point soon, getting us prepared. We have town departments that do that, that will put in a capital request this year with the idea that it might not pass this year, so that next year they've been asking and they can get the details necessary. So yeah, the schools, if I look at just was approved in 2025, the schools are about 53% of our budget. Police, fire, and EMS are a little over 15% of our budget. Health insurance is 5% of our budget. And that debt and other insurances like workers' comp and unemployment and fun things like that is another 8%. Leaves that the remaining items are about 18% of the budget, or about $3 million of everything else. And so if you're looking at that, we have to cut, 300,000 or so out of that. You're talking about a 10 or 15% cut out of that small item. And in that, all other items includes things that like keep the government, keep our town running. The electricity for this building, the oil for our buildings, the accountant's office, the tax collector's office. There's not a lot left. And I did sort of lob a hand grenade on social media and got a lot of commentary on it. I have read all the comments and counter comments. I have not participated in the debates because we're not allowed to. And some people had some other ideas that I think we've thought of and just aren't as easy as people think. People talk about potentially selling land that we have in town. The town owns a lot of land in this town, although almost all that land is in conservation. And as someone who sat on the housing trust and tried to find in all the land we own in town a buildable lot that we could build affordable housing on for a single family home, we've only found one, out of everything we own. And so it's not like we could sell those there's anything to sell to private developers or others to take something and put it back on the tax rolls. We've looked a little bit at added fees, but of course, we don't have a say in a bunch of those. And some fees just, you're not going to get another $300,000 worth of fees out of residents for things that we do. They talked about staffing cuts. That's one of the favorite things to be looking at. And really, after you remove police and fire, we probably have less than 20 full-time equivalents across the rest of town. And again, there's just not a lot of staff to go after for cutting. And yes, the totality of the cuts that I proposed is only about a little over $500,000. I think they are draconian. I think they're painful. I think they are well-run programs by well-runs. I am hoping that at the end that we don't need all of those. I also, some of them are small, but not all the costs are in those line items. That every time we have a collection of money somewhere, we have to have the policies to collect them. We have to have those sort of things audited. It takes time in the accountant's and treasurer's office and tax collector's office to run those sort of things. Some of these things that we do, Kit, are insurances that I said we really can't touch because it's what they are. But if we started doing fewer things that had fewer workers' comp related issues or fewer liability related issues, we own fewer buildings, those could potentially in the future cut some of those numbers. But they're not going to cut any of those numbers this year because right now we still run those programs and right now we still own those buildings. And so I have gone after some small stuff. I think the advantage in some respects is if we find cuts in other places, it's easier to not then cut some of those smaller things. But the smaller things add up. That 1,000 here, 2,000 there, those do eventually add up to real numbers, especially when they have impacts in other places. And so I hope when we start going line by line, some I will argue for more, some people have reached out to me with some very passionate arguments about why their thing adds to the town. And I believe they all add to the town. Again, no waste, fraud, or abuse. But if we got to find a way, if the school is asking for a $2.3 million increase when it comes to capital and operating, the budget they voted on last Tuesday, we have to find some way so that we don't run half the town out of their properties.
But at the same time too, I am also extremely disappointed in the school committee. Their presentation, wonderful, thank you, easier to follow. Gave us the majority of information that we were missing last year. But at the same time too, I find it very hard as a resident to cut more into the bone for the things that the town does when the school just expects I want 200, I want $2 million. So just give it to me. I mean, free cash, it's 30% for all. It's not just free cash for them. And unfortunately, and please let me know if I'm wrong, our tax-paying people, we're all one of them, you're gonna get whacked 3 times. So we don't have enough, we're in the hole. Make that loud and clear. We're what, 1.4 million in the hole? Right?
Yes,
Ish.
include, if you
If you
capital,
include the.
If you
capital.
include capital.
Yep.
Berlin is $1.4 million in the hole. And that is assuming that we suck up money out of our excess levy capacity, which means there is not a magical closet somewhere in the town where there is a chunk of cash that we can all reach in and take some out. So there's one tax increase that goes up. Homes are being reevaluated. That's great. My home is now worth more money, but now that is the second
Mhm.
tax increase that people are going to get hit with. And then if it does go to some sort of override, then that's the third,
Mhm.
3, count them, 1, 2, 3 tax increases that you are hitting the residents of this town with. And to me, that is not being fiscally responsible to the residents of this town. Boylston is in a much easier predicament. They said, Scott, here's $500,000. Do what you want with it. You get no more. Then that's it. I don't think that Berlin should foot the bill and have to go up with that. And I think that obviously that's a resident's decision. I'm one vote, Scott's one vote. You're all one vote, you're all one vote. But it's something that I think when the school board comes to finance committee on Wednesday at 7 o'clock, that they owe an explanation to the town why they think that it's okay to hit the Berlin residents, not once, not twice, but potentially 3 times in a tax increase. No, so, yeah, I know that they said they were gonna sharpen their pencils. Well, you know what? They need to sharpen them a little bit more for that, and again, you can't weed out capital because it's all that magical, we're only gonna give them one number, we're not gonna fight between operating costs. But when I look at some of this stuff, to me, yeah, I can see that there are probably 2 on here, one for Berlin Memorial and a couple for Tohoto that I would absolutely say, yeah, you have to do, but come on, over $400,000 in capital when there's what, 300 and some odd to spend? And again, that's 300 for everybody, not 300 for them.
Would it be helpful if I shared that capital spreadsheet? I did
Yeah.
throw it in the spreadsheet.
Yeah, because I want people
Well-
to see what we're looking at.
right, although at some point I think we have to start, voting on our expense line items
True.
to get through those
Right,
tonight.
and I have a really
And-
hard time with cutting more than the bone of Berlin to support this. And, I kid with people when they ask that there's only Scott and I, how are we gonna do it? And I kiddingly say rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock. But I know that there's gonna be things that probably Scott's gonna be like, cut, and I'm gonna be like, nope, absolutely not. Ultimately, it will go to the FinCom, and then ultimately it goes to the town. So again, folks, listen to what we're saying. We told you the truth last year that if you voted it, that your taxes were gonna go up. We're telling you the same exact thing again. Budget as it stands right now, expect a minimum of a $700 per household increase. That's huge, huge.
Right, and at the end, as you point out, at the end of the day, Peg and I agreeing or disagreeing.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter tons, because at the end of the day, it's who shows up at town meeting in May and votes on these budgets. And although some people say, by the time it gets to town meeting, it's too late. For large discussions it is, but anyone on the floor of town meeting could ask for a number to be increased or reduced. It can only be increased up to the amount originally requested, and it can only be reduced to 0. But that at town meeting, we can do that, and we only have 26 odd articles on town meeting this year, and so maybe there's some time for some bigger
Mhm.
debate about whether or not some of the programs that we've listed. I think my general goal would be to try to get it so that the health insurance number and the all other items number in my little spreadsheet, that what we're proposing to bring to town meeting are those two numbers going down. They don't have to go down by much, and really all other items only are going up by 1.38%. And so when we look at, Kristen and the department heads that are not police and fire, but that's a 1.3. That is less than inflation.
Mhm.
We are raising all this stuff, and even police and fire are going up by 6% or 6.75%, and that's with some contractual union salary increases and adding another position to the police department that was added sort of in the previous years. It's filling that out. So I think we have done well.
Mhm.
Just to clarify, all of public, I don't know, police and
Right.
fire broken out, but all of public safety, when you include, is an 8.9%
Right.
increase, because we had that 116,000 we were playing with, and that we had to go through
Yeah.
and factor that in and out, so.
And so we started at the bottom of the budget last time. Do we want to just start at we got through the top, we got through a chunk, didn't we?
I was gonna say,
I thought we got through.
I know Chief McClellan is here, and I believe Chief Shartner is online as well. I know you wanted some additional information from police and fire. I did go through and highlight in orange, the ones that you haven't voted on yet. And I will share this. I don't know if you want to start with those folks as they're here.
Sure. I have to figure, since I have like 4 copies of the budget, my copy of the budget, the last time we had my first.
So it
copy
should
of
be
the-
Folder.
the
I know,
one
it's
that
gotta
was
be, I
in
never
the,
pull out the folder.
yeah, the one that was posted.
The PDF.
And last Monday, we got down to, I think around line 70.
Yeah.
70, 71. So Fire Mike, since you're here, and we'll pull in Eric. You wanna,
Yeah, we can deal with them sort of one at a time since they're individual
Mhm.
budgets.
thanks for coming.
Not a
Figure
problem.
out who Eric is on here, because it doesn't seem on this.
Trying to reduce my tabs so I can find things faster.
If you want to
Yeah.
start with Chief McClellan, and I'm just
Sure.
figuring out, oh, there he is. Okay.
I mean, in 76 for me and the budget, which I apparently now opened twice. That you've had a bunch of open shifts, and so you have been giving money back at the end of the year because of those open shifts. Those open shifts have been around for most of your tenure.
Yep.
And whether or not budgeting a slower number makes some sense without asking for any change to the staffing patterns.
Mhm.
And so I think that's the question you've been prepared to answer, so.
Right, yeah, going through the, since we made the switch to the 24-hour shifts for the coverage with the additional full-time firefighters, one of my hopes out of that was that we're gonna get more call firefighters that were taking shifts because they weren't going to feel, when they sign up for the shifts, they're not sure if there's somebody else that's there. So I think there's a little bit of reluctance just because they don't do this on a regular basis. So when you're kind of by yourself, if you have nobody else and you're the only person there, it makes it a little nerve-wracking. Since we instituted this, we went from having on average like 30 to 40 open shifts every month. We're now down, last month and this month, we've had 5 open shifts. Last month, I believe all 5 of those end up getting filled with some additional coercion and a couple overtime shifts that were covered from my full-time staff. So we've moved in the direction where my hope is that is going to be the norm going forward, is that we're going to have very few open shifts. And that would be my concern kind of going forward, is that if we cut the money, I'd be coming back asking for additional funds to meet the staffing levels. The other thing, I ran a report that I shared with Kristen last week, and I was actually surprised myself. But as of this point right now, today, we're 45% ahead of where we were in call volume from last year. I knew we were busy. We're doing a lot of multiple calls with both the ambulances being out, but I didn't realize we were that busy. We're about 60 or 70 calls ahead of where we were last year. I don't expect that trend to continue, but I do expect that we are going to see it be a busier year for us. So with that call volume increase and stuff, I also worry about just, again, I'm going to run out of money in staffing. The other thing, my expense line item has also, I did not increase that at all going forward into FY26. And I know that's going to be a shortcoming as well because the ALS calls go up. I think this year we're projected, we're going to finish out, I think around $60,000 for FY25 for ALS costs. And again, as the call volume goes up, that cost is also going to go up for each ALS call we have. So those are just some of the things that I get concerned about if we're cutting just because I didn't increase that expense line. So I would be probably coming back to ask for some type of a line item transfer or something, just knowing that coming out of the gate.
I'm fine then with motioning, lines 48, 49, and 50, EMS salary, wages, full and part-time and expenses, as sort of, recommended by the TA and presented by you, realizing that when we finish, chief negotiation, we might have to come back and look at 48.
Yeah, I'm in favor, and Fire Mike, thank you for coming back and sharing that. I think when people look online and they look at these numbers and go, holy crap, they're huge. That it helps to have a little bit more explanation. I mean, that's shocking that you're 45% ahead in call volume. I mean, every time you meet with us,
45%
Yeah.
calls, okay.
yeah, that you meet with us, you're like, oh, it went out, it went right back out. One's out, the other one's out. We're always on 495, we're always on 290. I mean, I am beyond grateful that you are here and what your staff does for this town. So yeah, I'm in favor of not changing anything for a fire and EMS lines 48 through 50. So I will second your motion, Mr. Hawkins. And we've had lots of discussion.
Yep.
So you ready?
Yep,
All right, all those in favor?
aye,
Thanks, Fire Mike.
My
Thank you.
pleasure.
thank you.
Okay. All right,
All right, and
See, easy.
easy peasy. Chief Shatner.
Chief Shartner is online. I'm sharing my screen, so give me just a moment. All right, there he is.
You can hear me, right?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Yeah, and it's the same sort of question that I had for the fire chief, is that really in the wages and full and part-time, the police end up with a lot, some empty shifts, and I end up giving stuff back. And I thought that even in this year where you gave some back, you ended up with a lot of overtime in that too, and whether or not the 1.3 million needed for police wages and fires was really still all needed.
Yeah, if I was down a full timer or two, remember that I think you got the spreadsheet that Sergeant Andre did up for us. He's the one who keeps track of all of our open shifts. And our track from FY24 to FY25 is drastically different. The number of shifts we filled has increased dramatically. And I do anticipate using 99.9%, if not 101% of my budget this year.
So you're actually end up spending the whole thing that we've given you this year, because you're right, the numbers I was working, of course, are the fiscal year 24 closes, because we're obviously in fiscal year 25 right now.
Yeah, and that spreadsheet shows you the number of shifts that were not filled, and we give you an average. We used like the median average of payroll of what we should have turned back, which I think was around 87,000 just in payroll. And I spoke with June, $21,000 of our payroll came out of sick time because we had an IOD case for the year. So that was another 21,000 that was spent from another account, but technically from us.
I mean, again, this was not sort of picking on police, but there are larger numbers in the budget. We're grasping at straws to find ways to hold on to things that we're potentially not legally required to do.
Yeah, and our last three hires have had bachelor's degrees, which is about $12,000 to $13,000 more per officer in expenses.
Right, and that also means that we have a more highly trained and qualified police working for this town too, which is
Yes.
good, because around town you really only hear great things about both, but actually almost all our town departments. If I could, so I keep going back and forth between with the handouts and then I think and I leave it to FinCom to figure out sort of how much we take out of, you know, public safety stabilization or public safety mitigation funds to cover some of these. But I will then be fine to make the motion for lines 45 through 47 as recommended by the town administrator, requested by the department, which is police salary, wages, full and part-time and expenses, recognizing that the police salary line, which is the police chief's line, are actively undergoing contracts, will likely need to be adjusted based on the outcome of those negotiations.
Agreed. I mean, Eric, you and your team do wonderful things for the town along with Fire Mike and his crew. So,
Thank you.
this one I will absolutely support and second the motion for lines 45 through 47. Lots of discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Thank you very much.
And again, appreciate you, Eric, taking time out of your vacation to have a chat with us tonight.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you, Chief.
Go enjoy your evening.
Yep. If I could take on, because it's also in the memo you provided, which was the building inspectors department. And that one of the things that was pointed out in the memo is that the 3-year average revenue per year is 136,000. And trying to reconcile the difference between that and the permit logs that I get every month that show $2,000 or $3,000 a month in permit fees. And so that only comes to like 36 to 40,000. How do we get the $100,000 difference between what they're saying is in revenue and I'm seeing in the permit logs?
So he went back 3 years and looked over the 3-year average for the permit logs, and that's what he had come up with. So I'm not sure. I can do a little more digging.
But are they artificially inflated because it was so busy from a couple years ago with Highland Ridge and Highland Commons and the apartments where you compare that to now and there's not that level of busyness, for lack of a better word?
So he actually details it a little bit more in his attachments. They were PDF, so I scanned them in. If you go to the page 16, you do see calendar year 22 was higher. It was 208,000. Calendar year 23 was 106, and for calendar year 24, it was 92,000. So he was giving you a little bit more current data because he's
Mhm.
giving you half of the tail end of FY 24 and the front half of FY 25. So that could be part of it as well. And one of the things he talked about was the fact that, you know, there's peaks and valleys when it
Mhm.
comes to permitting. So, you know, you had the River Bridge project that brought in almost $450,000, or $400,000, I believe, from a permit one year. But then there's your leaner years, and we apparently in the past have used some of like the River Bridge permit fees to offset certain things, like the ladder truck was my understanding. Some of that Margaret had taken and
Mhm.
used as an offset. So I think, given the fact that it is a department that does bring back revenue and a significant amount of revenue, and I did actually reach out to the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission. There are some towns that could potentially be interested in partnering, but he didn't think a fee-based system would really, you know, be something that folks nowadays would be interested in doing because it would make recruitment and retention difficult. So we can certainly look at shared services, particularly as we go forward. I know that the growth hasn't been what it was in previous years, but my recommendation would be to take another look at it when the current building inspector retires and see if we could go to shared services at that point.
I mean, because the fees have definitely dropped off. I mean, you
Right.
look at,
They're less than half of
Yeah.
what they were 2 years ago.
yeah, FY 22 is 18 and change, 23 is 9.3, and 24 is ish 9.3. So yeah, as Scott was saying, you've dropped significantly,
Right.
and I would expect it to probably drop significantly again this year. Do you know where
I think
they
it's
are?
stabilized over 20, so all the permits were pulled by 23 for FY 23 for Highland Ridge because the
Right.
permits get paid for and pulled for upfront.
Yep.
So it has, I would say those last 2 calendar years are pretty accurate in terms of what
Yeah.
you're gonna see going
And
forward.
although fiscal calendar year 24 is lower than 23, it's not lower by much.
No,
They're both half of what they were in 22.
Right.
yeah, you're talking like 24 $100,000 lower this year or in 24.
The other thing I think two other things you want to take into account is that the assistant in the department helps with the zoning board, and the building commissioner is also the zoning enforcement officer. And given the fact that we don't have a town planner or a planning department, they're filling that gap in so
Mhm.
much as they can. So there are things that are salary based that are not able to bring in fees, but are certainly a service that we do need in the town, like interpreting zoning.
And the gas and plumbing inspector, their salary is all based on fees.
It is.
So we're not saying, hello, plumbing inspector, your salary is $800 million. It's, a percentage of whatever was brought in.
That is
Right.
correct.
That's why there are expenses for those two departments.
Mhm.
So for example, on the upstairs project, we have to pay the inspectors even though it's a town project, because that's how they get paid. Through the permit fee, rather, is what I meant to say.
And those have dropped off as well.
We are not seeing the development that we saw in previous years. I can tell you that Linda was just, we had a department head meeting today, and Linda Barisha, the assessor, had 9 new homes in FY, I forget if it was FY 25 or if it was calendar year 24. So she's working on a reval with DOR. So there are a number of like small homes that are trickling here and there, but you're not seeing any large scale developments even on the horizon. He also did go through and look at his budget and recommended potentially taking out another 7,500 in adjustments, given the budget circumstances that we're working with.
I think if we came back next time with where those 7,500 are, I'd be fine.
Okay. Yeah, I believe everything is out of, it's 2,000 out of expenses, 4,252 out of the admin line item. This is on page 7, and reducing the alternate inspector line. And he looked at that based on how many hours are being worked right now. So the admin is quite efficient in the office and has been working closer to 20 hours a week and getting the work done. So that budget could be scaled back.
Well, why don't we skip those line items for now until you can,
Let me give you a revised budget.
yeah, plug it in next week.
Yeah, thinking
Or-
that will be a quick vote at that point.
Yeah.
Sure.
So then if we're picking up, are we at
Looks like
Yeah.
70.
70? Yeah, let me know.
All right. Bring it down.
And Kristen, can you plop that budget up?
I sure can. I'm just jumping down to
Please.
70 and then
Oh, yeah.
I'll bring that up. Give me 1 second.
Did you make, or can we make line 69?
Yeah.
I think we had talked about lowering it to
That's
4K.
4,000. Yeah, I thought line 69 was 4,000.
Yep. So if you look, if you go all the way across to the FY 26
Oh, there it
FB line, that's your
is.
votes.
Okay. All right. So
Actually,
we're,
to make it easier, I can do a little.
no
Oh,
worries.
can we
Now
highlight
that,
it?
now,
Oh,
no,
now
no,
we're-
now
now
that
we
we
know
know
where
where to
to
look,
look.
I'm good. All right, well, we are at line 70 and 71, which is
Transfer station.
transfer station.
To me, again, this is another one that a minority, a small minority of town actually uses. Even though I don't know why everyone doesn't use it, because using the transfer station is less money than having private haulers come to your house. The idea that people are spending extra money they don't need to seems strange, and it becomes a catch-22 that if twice as many people in town, if we got to half of town using the transfer station, they would have the revenue to have more hours, which is, I think, one of the reasons why people don't use the transfer station more. But it is also one that sort of those two numbers there, and yes, that's about $75,000, doesn't really show the full cost. And that one, there's revenue that offsets it, which is good. But the amount of extra, there are vendors, contracts, and workers comp and liability and building maintenance stuff that doesn't show there because of the way we do things in town, which is still a good practice. Health insurance is one item. You're not spending time dividing that up among all the other places. I was intrigued though by something that was said at the last meeting is, do we make an attempt for at least a year to see if the transfer station can really run on their revenue? Because you said that in their offset receipts account, there is a serious chunk of serious, a couple $100,000 there that could potentially cover their costs for the year.
Mhm.
And I would during that year try something that might even be counterintuitive to what I've been talking about, in that maybe we just in the annual census send people out their stickers, or they just have to come, and that we actually reduce the revenue to get more people there. We make it a service. Because again, online, everyone's like, oh my goodness, this is like the most important thing the town does, even though in reality, really about a quarter to a third of the town uses it.
Mhm. I mean, and that's an expense to a household too. If you
It is,
close the dump,
right.
and sorry for calling it the dump. It's always been the dump, but it's the transfer station. You know, a sticker fee is what, 200 and,
Yeah, I did the math once.
Something.
I think the online is right. It's between 2 and 3 times the amount of money you're paying for the transfer station sticker as it would if you had a private hauler sort
Correct.
of come to your house.
I mean,
And the people who complain about the hours of the transfer station is why the private hauler is only at your house one day
Right.
and at one point in time during that one day. So if
Mm.
you're late at putting out your bags or your things, you know,
don't get
you're
it.
just SOL for that week. So
well, the thing is too, and maybe the transfer station could start to look at some of their policies. You know, I've been there when a pickup truck will just pull in and go, this is from my house.
right.
And
Yeah.
it goes,
Mm.
you know, so I don't know if they can start to look at some of their policies. I don't know, they mentioned it when they were at FinCom about potentially going for a paper bag fee, you know, so would that force people to recycle? Because right now you show up with your giant contractor bag that has plastic and glass and everything else in it, and you just give it a heave, you know, compared to, well, if I'm not gonna be paying for a bag, then you know what? I'm taking my glass out and I'm walking it over, and I'm taking my plastics out and I'm walking it over instead of, you know, so I don't know, but I
Right.
think that there's things that the transfer station could potentially do to tighten some of their policies, because if you get rid of everything goes in the bag and I huck it, compared to I'm going to, you know, put it in its proper place, does that cut down on the weight of the stuff that gets hauled out? I mean, Stan, God love him, I see him in there in the glass container breaking the bottles, because you can fit far more broken bottles than you can with a bunch of bottles intact, you know, so he's trying to be smart about that as well. So I don't know. I think that there's things that hopefully the transfer station can do to look and tighten some of their policies that just make it a little bit tighter on the town people to do what they're supposed to do, instead of one bag huck that has everything in it. And here I come in my pickup truck with everything in it. I
So
don't
I
know.
did speak with Sue Regera, who handles the budget right now for Board of Health, because they only have a 10-hour a week admin at the moment. The revolving fund at this, as of, I believe it was December 30th, when we ran the reports, had $144,000 in it. I made the mistake of not realizing the stickers come in and front load that amount. So when I calculated it out for the rest of the year, I had a much higher number. This part of the year, it trickles in, although they have been charging for pieces
Mhm.
now, especially with the credit card swipe,
Mhm.
but that's an ebb
Right.
and flow. So there's no way to really budget around that. So I couldn't really take the 27,000 out of that, also because Sue is leaving, and she and the Board of Health estimate they need another 10 hours to have an admin person do the transfer station work that was being done by a volunteer. And that was going to come out of the revolving fund. So that would eat up any small additional expense that was there, because you're losing a longtime board member.
Right,
who was
which also
doing
goes
that
back to
work.
the Board of Health spends a lot of time on transfer station stuff, which there are probably other things. I mean, it would be easier to be recruiting for for Board of Health if that wasn't a giant focus of what they end up doing.
I don't know, I think for now, we just leave the transfer station, but with your suggestion, Scott, that we start to look at what's in their revolving fund and can it offset some of their expenses.
And I think it could also be that we, so I mean, I said at the beginning of this, I'll end up giving it, I want people to look that we have looked at
Mhm.
seriously and including looking at horrible options
Agreed.
to make this happen. That I would like us to explore in the fiscal year 26, moving the transfer station underneath the auspices of the highway department. Because I think it also potentially gives a highway department ladder of
Mhm.
improvement that someone could start as a not necessarily sort of a stand management level, but a frontline person could work at the transfer station while they get their CDL. And then, then it's also, because right now you have unpaid Board of Health or barely paid Board of Health volunteering when they can't get someone to cover. And incredible volunteers, but that's shouldn't necessarily be part of the job and they're again, makes it harder to potentially recruit.
But if you do move it to highway, then you need to look at potentially increasing highway personnel.
Oh, yeah, no,
as well.
this money would go
Yeah.
potentially to the highway for
Yep.
the personnel. We're not talking about getting rid of the personnel necessarily, but that there could be some efficiency, like highway has an admin person who does their administrative stuff a little bit.
No, that's
No?
Fred, actually.
Oh.
Yeah.
He turned
That-
that money in to fund the building maintenance operator position because he needed more for facilities. And Fred is actually phenomenal when it comes to the accounting side of things. June will tell you all day long, he is to the penny. So,
Well, he was here, so wherever
I
you went,
know.
Fred, thank you. We appreciate you. Yeah, I mean, and highway is down there. They're down there tamping down the containers to try and put
Right.
more in it. They're down
If we
there.
didn't have a transfer station, they could be repairing roads at that time.
They're down there with the wood chipper when the Christmas trees come in to make it mulch type of thing. So, yeah, maybe there are some things that we can do for the transfer station to tighten them up in the next coming year. So do we want to vote on 70 and 71?
Yeah, what's your recommendation on 70 and 71?
You know what, I will stay as is. I will vote to approve line 70 and 71. But with a bunch of contingency fees that the transfer station needs to come back to us with recommendations on what they're going to do, that it just cannot continue to be business as is, that they need to tighten their regulations as to what is considered trash, and what will be accepted as trash.
Well, I also, I mean, this is where money comes in too, because I also think they need to do something to make it safer.
Yeah,
That there are accidents and small injuries there, here and there, and I think it's just I mean, I think our liability insurance would go down
Mhm.
a chunk if we didn't have a transfer station.
I do have to say, I don't like hearing about people crushing glass. That makes me a little nervous. I'm not gonna lie. But,
I know, but understand the intent,
oh, absolutely.
behind it.
I will at least second your motion.
Okay. All right, thank you. All those in favor of approving 70, 71? Aye.
I'm just going to abstain,
All right,
which does allow it to pass, correct?
yes.
Yeah, good. I'm just trying to, it's still,
Does it
Well-
allow it to?
Well, no,
Uh,
it goes to FinCom, so I mean,
Right.
it's a non.
yeah.
Yep.
The recommendation is still keeping 70 and 71 at
Right.
its number. I'm not staying in the way of that.
I'm putting that, oops, that looks
Yeah.
weird. I was gonna put that in as a 1-0-1 vote, which
Yeah.
means it has one yes,
Yeah.
0 no's, and 1
Yeah.
abstention, and then they can, no, on that.
72, the cemetery, their mowing and maintenance expenses are all coming out of highway, right? That's not, or is that back charged to the cemetery?
No, I believe
Highway
Highway
pays-
is doing the
Highway does the
mowing.
mowing.
Right.
Yep.
This is- Right.
So is the expenses the money for? Oh, what's his title? Yeah,
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
the
superintendent.
superintendent.
Right.
And yes, any other tools or small ancillary items that they need to purchase for regular, like everyday stuff that's not mowing related maintenance wise.
Yeah,
Yeah, they've requested a mower through capital. The discussion they had with Fred was that Fred and the cemetery commission decided cemetery would request that funding directly from capital.
in fiscal year 24, cemetery only spent 8 of their 16,000. Although again, it's one of those that their expenses can vary
Mhm.
based on a bunch of things, because I don't think their fees necessarily cover the costs of what they're doing. And so I'd encourage them to look at their fees, but I'll be fine with
Yeah, I was just gonna show
keeping
you
cemetery
that.
at their number.
Okay, because they are, the fees have gone down. The accounting office is only comfortable with me estimating 93.50
Mhm.
in fees coming in for, receipts coming in for 26. So,
Right, and what I say is the per burial fee, I don't think, or the plot sale fee has not gone up in a while.
not that
And
I'm
so I would
aware of.
encourage it, they are an independent body, so we don't have a say over their fees, but I would greatly encourage them to look at some raises. But I do also appreciate, I think this is like the 3rd or 4th year in a row, they've not increased their expense line item, and so I was gonna let them be, and motion line 72 cemetery expenses at 16,059.
I'll second that. So all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, Board of Health. Salary, part-time wages and expenses.
Do we actually have say over the Board of Health salary? Or are they allowed to set that themselves based on what town meeting does?
You are welcome to make a recommendation on any of these line items. They make a request and ultimately the FinCom will decide what gets put forth, but I don't think that there's an issue with the select board making a recommendation.
I think I'm slowly going through and trying to recommend that elected officials, we zero out their salaries.
I would support that.
And so I think and then I'm not gonna quibble with their wages, part-time or expenses, mostly because they've been keeping the line on things and because they do a bunch of volunteer stuff there. And so I would motion line 73 Board of Health salary to go to 0, but wages, part-time and expenses be at the requested amounts of 7,410 for line 74 and 900 for line 75.
I will second that. Lots of discussion, time for vote. All those in favor?
Aye. 76 and 77, Kristen, I've had a couple of emails on it. I'm still
Sorry.
quite confused about those two. What Neshoba Health does versus Neshoba Nursing. And because I was under the impression that Neshoba Nursing was the rabies clinics and the flu clinics and the COVID clinics, which I don't think I want to continue doing. But Neshoba Board of Health is one of those that helps with our permits and our inspections of our food places, which
Mhm.
I definitely think we should still keep doing.
So my understanding in speaking with Jim Garaffi, who is the executive director, is that it is split out this way, but it is ultimately one assessment. If we want to be part of Neshoba, we have to pay both. So I
Interesting.
actually did ask for a list of services that are provided. I have not received that yet, but I wanted to get a comprehensive list together.
And so maybe as a town, we shouldn't have them as 2 separate line items if they're just one contract, or because there would not be an environment where we would contract with different people for these 2 line items.
No, and I will tell you, you certainly aren't going to get a health agent for
Right,
under $20,000.
right. I mean, it's one of those collaboration with surrounding towns, and the type of thing is definitely saving our town money and getting us better expertise than we could get on our own. It sounds like we can't really then touch either of these line items, so that we might at some point request more when negotiating with them, that some of the stuff that I mean, I get that they're sort of a public service, but if you own an animal, getting a rabies shot should be something you get done as the cost of owning the animal, and flu shots are now available at every pharmacy
Drugstore,
out there,
yep.
drugstore out there. That's not as needed of a service as it might have been years ago.
So do we want to hold on 76 and 77 until Kristen can get that list and
I know if I think what we already have back is they're not severable. In other words, we can't do
Yep.
one and not the other. We either have to do both or neither. And right now, neither is not something we can afford as a town or want to do. Because I think doing neither and trying to find someone else besides Neshoba Health, the health line would be twice of what we're paying there, and
At
we'd be
least.
penny wise and pound foolish. So I'll be fine voting for line 76 and 77 as sort of already contracted.
I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, down to lines 78 through 80, which are COA, wages full-time, wages part-time, and expenses.
And so, the wages full-time is the one I'm fine with. Wages part-time has to go back to that COA van. Where, I look at both the cost of the maintenance of the van and maintaining the van and the insurance on the van, and 33,000 or 25,000 for wages for people to run the van, and the amount of time that we're spending constant looking for drivers, and the unpredictability because we're constantly looking for drivers, whether or not we are better off potentially putting $10,000 more into the expense line item for rideshare
Mhm.
subsidies and wiping out line 79.
And I did look into like Uber and Lyft and kind of what their requirements are. They do Corey check people, but they don't have the other sort of health CPR helping people in and out that you would probably need for that population. And I think that would be a bit of a liability, or for us to recommend that people that may have issues getting in and out of the van, they don't get out and help you. So that was a bit of, or CPR or any of those things.
I mean, honestly, I would rather, take the 10,000 and put it towards the van that the gentleman gave us the presentation on
Mm.
last week, and put those towards ride vouchers to say,
Hmm.
here, Scott, you've taken the van 20 times. So we're gonna give you insert dollar amount here per month.
Mhm.
You don't use it. It's not like Scott can, go to the
Right.
general store and buy 15 bottles of soda. It's gonna be, here's $2 for my ride. Here's $2 for my ride. That may help to increase ridership.
Sure.
For that. So I would rather do that. I would not be comfortable at all putting anyone in town in an Uber or a ride share.
My husband could tell you a
Well,
few horror stories.
Yeah, see, that's why
And I'm fine being very less prescriptive. Mine is there's probably a better way of doing it at cheaper.
Yep.
And so, how about we wipe out line 79 and we add 10,000 to line 80 for
Mhm.
some sort of alternatives
Mhm.
towards to alternatives.
Transportation, yep.
Transportation, yep.
Yeah, no, I like that.
It's a net $15,000 cut to the budget. I mean, the van was first, I was on FinCom when the van was first proposed. I think it was designed to be an experimental thing to say that I don't think it ever has lived up to at least what my expectations would have been. And then as we just, hiring people to drive vehicles right now is just, in this environment, the schools are having a hard time,
Yeah.
truck drivers. You see, if you're willing to do long haul driving as a CDL, there are $100,000 sign-on bonuses for
Mhm.
some of those folks, we're just not gonna ever, compete with that. And so I think until like wages settle themselves back down or other alternatives, I think at the end of the year, we're just done with the van. I would, make the request that we keep the requested line item still at the 33, just in case to give someone the opportunity at the floor of town meeting to make a passionate argument. And if they get a majority of people to put it back, I want to give them the opportunity to be able to put it back. But I don't, and so I did make a motion at the beginning of that, didn't I?
Yes, you did.
That's good.
And I will second it. Do we know how many people are actually taking our van, our COA van?
For the last 9 months, none. We don't have any van drivers. And
Peg's
we
party
can't-
party bus when I retire.
That's
There you
right.
go. Mhm.
I did talk to Josh Rickman over at WRT. I followed up with him after the last
Yep.
session. So those are I believe it was either 9 or 11 individual riders that have picked up those 30 some odd rides in the past month. That is far more than we were seeing riding on the COA van.
Yeah.
That was like one person at a time going to a medical appointment or or things like that. One thing I can do is I know it's $2 after June
Mhm.
30.
Right.
I would be happy to reach out to Josh to find out what it would cost to subsidize that, or pay
Yeah.
for that, depending on what our ridership looks like.
Mhm. I mean, yeah, you've got,
Yeah.
a service that is there Monday through Saturday, extended hours
Yeah.
for that compared to our van. And we don't have to pay upkeep. If
Right.
something breaks on the van, we're not responsible
I
for
was
it.
gonna say, I have no problem saying that we would, as a town, like, pay for all the rides on the van for Berlin residents for
Hmm.
fiscal year 26. And if we somehow have over 5,000 rides, which the $10,000 would get us,
Yep,
I would gladly come back and find other money in our budget. If there are 5,000 rides from the town of Berlin in a year, that is, a
Tremendous.
chunk a month.
correct.
That's way more in a month than we're generally seeing a year in our COA van. So,
Mhm.
The other option would be, and Josh is still, WRTA
Right.
is, we're talking about how do we address points west?
yep,
So perhaps we could put some
Yeah.
of this money towards
Yep.
getting folks to Worcester,
Yeah.
because
So-
there are people that have appointments
Yep.
that way too.
Correct.
yeah. So I think we give them some,
Mhm.
and that the COA can figure out what they think is the best to do with that.
Yep.
Good.
All right, so a motion and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, Skippy Doo, we are on lines 81 through 83, which are our veterans' salary expenses and benefits.
Good news, well, not great news, but that has gone down only unfortunately because we have less veterans. So we have, yeah, not good news. We looked at the budget. I did reach out because we did not see reimbursement on on state aid this year, and there were not enough veterans that qualified under Chapter 115 to receive state reimbursement on the cherry sheet this year. And so based on what they're actually looking at potentially paying out, Brian was comfortable cutting that number in half.
And this veterans benefits salaried person is a required state position. The state requires us to have this.
We have to have one. We could possibly share, but we are actually, because he's in Hudson.
Right,
So,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, Jim helps out too, who is
Yep.
our former veterans agent who's local.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, and when my dad passed years ago, they were absolutely wonderful
amazing
and very
people.
helpful and paperwork that I needed. I stood there and he just went da-da-da-da-da, ding, and handed it to me and I walked out. So
Yeah.
I can't say enough about that office down there.
That expertise is hard to find.
Well, you're not dealing with, happy veterans, you're dealing with someone who's lost a loved one and they're going in, so they have that compassion, they have that care. So I'm totally fine with accepting
Yeah.
lines 81 through 3.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
I will second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And
Thank
just to
you.
clarify, you're comfortable with the 5,000 as
Yes,
opposed to
yeah,
the 10?
yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes. All right. Onward we go to,
Culture and recreation.
Yeah.
yes, lines 84 and 85. Wages for part-time, wages and part-time and then expenses.
Right. And this whole section of the budget, section 600, culture and recreation, none of which we're required to do, but all of which make the town
Mhm.
fun,
Right.
make the town have the
Yep.
energy. It's where we probably have the most volunteers involved. And it's not a large budget, but because it's not required, it's also legally the easiest to cut. If you look at sort of every other line we've looked at today, it's like,
Correct.
oh, because of this law,
Right.
because of this other thing, there's nothing really there to cut.
One
But
quick caveat on the library.
Yep.
Is that in order to meet our minimum local contribution and keep the state certification, they have to be open at least 20 hours a week. Apparently losing that state certification is extremely challenging to get back. So just one thing to keep in mind there.
yes. And so the library is going to be one of those things it's not something we could reduce without serious consequences in other areas. It's one of those things that we would either need to get rid of or expand or something, but I'm going to be fine with the numbers as they sit. They actually have done well. Their expense line went up a chunk, but their salaries went down a little bit. And so as a whole, their difference is only a couple thousand.
And that is actually due to their minimum spending that they have to
Yep.
spend on books and other materials, as mandated by the state. That had to go up.
It is interesting that at some point I'd love to do whether or not that math makes sense anymore, because because the grant we get is from my time on FinCom, that we have to spend a certain amount on books to get a state grant to help us operate our library. But every year they raise the amount of money we have to spend on the books and lower the amount of grant. At a certain point,
It doesn't
it's
make
like,
sense.
it doesn't make sense anymore, that the library should spend what they should still always spend money to update and get more books and replace the things that are lost, but at some point it might not make fiscal sense to keep that particular grant if it's.
I think it's on the cherry sheet,
Right.
so it's all part of the state certification. I'm not sure you
Okay.
can break them off, but I can find out.
Yep.
I mean,
Um,
the library has done wonderful things. I mean, with their children director that they have
Oh, yeah.
downstairs, she is cranking programs left and right. She's working with rec. I am
Some
down. the
programs
li-
I've wanted to go to.
Oh, I know. I am down the library multiple times a week. Victoria and her staff, truly, I would be lost without them, and I don't think that I would have that type of relationship if I went to another library when they know the types of books that I like, and I look in my queue and all of a sudden there's 15 more and I'm like, psych, this makes it easy. So, yeah, I think we need to do whatever we can
Yep.
do to keep our library.
So I will motion 84 and 85 as TA is recommended, which is also as the department recommended.
And I will second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
One quick thing to add, they did have a supplemental funding request for more hours, because right now they are trying to be open 33 hours with not enough staffing.
Yeah.
So they are having a discussion about lowering the number of hours because they don't have sufficient staffing at this funding level. So I just wanted to point that out.
But they would still be over 20 with this funding. I think. Yeah,
Yes, they
yeah.
might be at 20.
I mean, it could be a line item that we go back to at the end when we see if how the schools end up shaking out, if there's other sort of revenue source, how we do in a couple of the other line items coming forward.
Yeah, it
Uh,
wasn't a huge request. I just wanted to
Yep.
pull it up so I
Mhm.
can see. Well, it does come out to $26,000, 26,612. That would be to increase the hours for the youth services librarian and a library assistant 3, so that they had staffing on both floors. And you don't have to close part of the library while you have the other part open, like having
Yep.
nobody in the children's section. It's no problem.
All right, next up, rec. Part-time wages and expenses.
Right. This becomes one of the ones that I was looking at eliminating. Again, huge volunteers. They do
Mhm.
some great programming. It is also one of those that I believe sort of hides the true nature or the true costs of these sort of things.
Mm.
Is that the cost to sort of keep our fields in good shape, the costs of the small fees that we bring in that again have to be sort of tracked and maintained. It is one of those line items that to me seems to go up a chunk every year, although their current request is a slight reduction.
That is because $1,000 got moved to the electricity line item for the irrigation project, because June felt that would be more appropriate in the electricity budget, and I did not disagree. So just to clarify.
I mean, I'd like to talk to rec too, because I was at their meeting last week. Now I don't have to do the liaison update. I know,
Yeah,
how
see?
nice is this?
I
Boom,
give you the right.
boom chakalaka. I mean, they are successful in their after-school programs. They've got about 30 kids that are showing up.
Wow.
Granted, they're not going to have that many more after-school programs
Yep.
because the year's coming to an end. But they're bringing in money. As I said, they've got yoga, kids yoga. They've got things going on at 1870, that are fairly new. I know that they're looking at different types of summer programs for like STEM, which would be nice to bring that around and make it available to folks. I would almost like to see what they have, kind of like as an offset, to see what they're bringing in and does it cover? And yeah, they're doing a lot of administrative work.
Mm.
I got to get the contract to get the porta potties cleaned. I got to get the contract to get the fields taken care of. I gotta get the, right, I gotta get the contract, for the equipment, I gotta get the contract for the pavilion, so, there's a lot of work, again, that those 3 ladies are doing a lot on, but I would like to see a little bit more of their,
Like this couldn't be its own sort of nonprofit, I participate in rec activities, not necessarily in town, but none of them are government departments that run them.
I don't know. I mean, Kristen, is that something that could be looked at to turn rec into like a 501(c)(3)?
I mean, it would have to be another organization that would create it. The town can't create a 501(c)(3), and we really can't even give any guidance with regard to that, like the creation setup. That all has to be done with the state, IRS and all of that. And I know that because when they were trying to set it up for Jack's, I referred them to a few people that might be able to help, but we really have to stay totally separate from
Okay.
that. If they wanted to set up a Friends of or another
Yeah.
department, that would be something they have to do on their own.
No, with the success of their programs, I really would like to see that. And I know that they still haven't made a decision on a rec director or a rec admin
I
assistant.
was just gonna ask about that. Okay, no
They
decision. yet.
haven't. So the part-time wages that you're seeing are your camp counselor, kids
Yep,
that are
okay.
doing this. I don't want to see rec going away. I don't have children anymore that are
Mhm.
in the town, but if he was little, I'd be shoving him into their programs. I think that they have these programs to let kids stay in town and not go Hudson, Boylston, wherever is closer. I'm fine with those two lines, the way that they are. But with the exception of, I would like a little bit more detail into the revenue that they're bringing in and what can they put back and potentially offset maybe for the wages. And I don't know if they can,
Mhm.
but I don't have, again, this is another one of those, I don't have an Excel spreadsheet that says that they brought in,
Right.
$52 bazillion over the past year. So, we don't need to ask you for wages anymore because we can afford it.
One of the arguments that was made to me is that they are on the cusp of being sort of revenue neutral. I mean,
Mhm.
that's cost neutral. And that sort of give them another year and that next year's numbers could be substantially lower.
And I think that was the intention when that whole discussion started, is that we need numbers because we didn't have any. You couldn't tell me that X amount of kids were in the program. You couldn't tell me that, for the different programs, the jugglers, the magicians, the people that they're bringing in, that they're charging. There wasn't any of that information. And I think we need that. We need that solid data. Or let me rephrase, I need that solid data.
Right, so that.
They do have numbers?
They gave me specific numbers of participants, but not anything with money.
Okay.
Right,
So for the comment, for those who didn't hear, there was information that was provided on number of participants, but not not revenue numbers.
fiscal year 24, their budget was 17.5. And so they are more than twice what they were 2 years ago. But I'm not going to stand in the way of your vote.
Yeah, okay.
I-
right.
I'll second your motion
All right, all those in favor? Aye.
and I will abstain on that one as well.
All right, cultural council expenses of $1,500. I remember seeing an email come whizzing through on that.
Yes, a longer one even. And so it was my wording is that eliminating the cultural council was a cultural council expenses, not necessarily the cultural council, because they
Right.
also get a state grant for some of the stuff. And one of my pet peeves about this particular line item, which has nothing to do with, again, the programming they do, is that this was put in when I was on FinCom because they were going to lose the state grant to fund the projects in the state, in the town, and we wanted to keep some of them going, and they ended up not losing the grant. And so they do now have more money than they would have had they we not given the extra, but I don't know how much this extra $1,500 really adds to it. And again, it's one of those, it's more checks, it's more
I
things to
know.
track.
They do use it.
They do
looked
use,
at
yes,
it.
I did look at it and they do spend it. So,
I believe they match some of their grants with a little bit of town funding is my understanding. So they get a grant from the Cultural Council. I can confirm that with MJ if you'd like.
sure, because I might feel a little differently if I thought this was actually matching and making more money available to the town than otherwise available. So the memory that they have to sort of counter is this was started because they were going to lose the state grant and they never lost the state grant.
So do we want to skip 88?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so that's a big skip. All right. Next up is line 89. It is the Historical Commission expenses.
I will motion 615 for the Historic Commission expenses.
This is penny wise and pound foolish.
Yeah, I'm going after tiny ones too. So,
I know, and I have far more comments that unfortunately don't relate to $615. So this is not the time nor the place, so I will second your motion. All those in favor for line 89?
Aye.
Aye.
Line 90, Memorial Day expenses, which I just think is not worded right anymore. I think at one point this was used a lot for the parades and celebrations that happen on Memorial Day. It is actually used mostly these days, as been explained to me, for the making sure we have flags on veterans' graves in
Mhm.
town. And a couple other little expenses along that. I did look at it. They are spending it. I might be able to quibble about whether or not we're getting $2,000 worth of flags twice a year, but
Mhm.
the amount of effort that would take versus the benefit is too tiny. And so I'm going to motion the $2,000 for Memorial Day expenses.
Agreed. I think it would be a big disservice to those veterans who have served and have passed. If you didn't go through, because I know that I take great pride when I visit my dad's and there's a nice shiny flag there, with that,
Right.
and there's flowers,
And
so,
I'm walking South Cemetery all the time and I'm picking up flags that have been blowing off their things and putting them back and writing them up if they've
yeah,
leaned over and are touching the ground. And so
yeah.
I share some of that as well.
Yep.
I would like at some point, like, who is the body that is authorized? I know who person is doing it. And I'm fine with that, but at some point, like, that seems to be a line that doesn't necessarily have a committee of the town.
No, it doesn't. And my understanding is that's the Veterans Graves Officer's responsibility that's appointed by the
Okay,
board annually.
as long as there's a formal position that we appoint as a volunteer to do it, I'm fine with that.
All right. Well, that concludes that section of budget fund.
Yes,
So let us move down to
101.
101. Look at that, he's making me scroll.
I know.
Wow.
Health insurance.
All right, 101, health insurance.
Again, health insurance every year turns back $100,000 to $200,000 of unspent stuff. And the idea that we held back sort of what we're spending right now, plus some sort of additions throughout the year, I think was back again when we had the schools also doing it, where you had a much bigger population, a much bigger churn, where the potential increase was more substantial. I also believe that because of policies that we've done in the last couple of years, the number of people eligible for health insurance have gone down, including some people who won't be who were in fiscal year 25 getting insurance, who will not be in fiscal year 26 getting insurance. And so I would love us to find a number closer to like $700,000 for that line item.
And at some point too, I know that we just voted it this year, but I'd like for us to look at, those people who currently have insurance and are elected, that we said, hey, you can keep your insurance as long as you keep your spot. I think we need, without changing into another role, I think we seriously need to look at that to say, we'll give you, whatever the rest of your term is, 3 years. And then after that, even if you get reelected, the town will not be providing.
It is highly uncommon to provide health insurance for elected officials in this day and age. You
So-
don't see it
So
across the state.
Yeah, so I think that that's another one of those when we are free policies that we seriously need to look at. Again, it's nothing that's gonna change tomorrow, so I don't want people to freak out and be like, oh, you're taking my insurance tomorrow? I have no insurance, but to say, yeah, at the end of your term, you're not gonna have insurance that is paid by the town. And again, I don't know what the cost of that is for elected officials, but to me, that's an easy one to get rid of, because there are other options on the market.
I we can certainly get rid of the extra spaces that we save. Right now, we have 2 single plans and 2 family plans, but I would not be comfortable getting rid of more than we have on
Yeah.
the current plan. So that, I took 1 space out already because we were at 3 and 3, and that was a reduction of 44,000, I believe. Yep, so I could likely get you down another 88. That would,
So I show in fiscal year 24, when we budgeted 734,000, we only spent 555,000. So I don't think our insurance is, especially since we're shrinking the number of people who are eligible. I don't know how we get to a number of 900,000 in 1 year or a year and a half.
so it's based on the people that are on it currently, as well as the 12.1% increase that we're facing in health and the 7% in dental. That's what's driving that number higher.
Right, but we are also losing at least a couple people off of the insurance.
Yep.
And so if we go to that, we have a current expenses plus enough to put another family person on, what does that number look like?
So that would be another single and family plan. So that'd be
But-
another 44K about. So you'd have 44,000 times 3 that you could reduce that by. 122? Is that right?
32.
32, thank you. That would be, wow, Peg.
32. Once a year, it doesn't matter. It's still peg math, that's right. Yeah. So then you're taking that down to 770?
The caveat I would have there is, again, we only have $110,000 in the reserve fund. And people are coming on and off the plan all the time, especially in this economy. I've had several people say my spouse's plan is changing and I may have to come on the town's insurance, and, you know, because everybody knows it's a sensitive subject. They're like, oh, I'm really sorry. You know, like, well, it is a benefit that you are entitled to, you know, as an
Mhm.
employee. And I understand people are sensitive about it. I just don't want us to get in a situation where we're having to have a town meeting in the fall and upping the reserve fund because of the number of people on the plan. That's my,
Well, already
Fear
having
there.
a town meeting in the fall.
hopefully, yes. I was thinking if we didn't have to, it would be ideal, but we are planning to. So if I took 132,000 out of that, it brings it down to 768.
I'd be comfortable with just taking 100 out for now and just having a wee little bit more of buffer.
So a number of 800,000?
Yeah. I mean, you're still cutting 100,000.
So making it 800,000.
Scott, what do you think? Or do you want to bring it down lower?
No, I'll leave it there.
All right. So can I get a motion?
I'll motion chapter 32B be 80,000,
800,000.
800,000.
I will second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, what line item next there, Mr.
I
Scott?
think that's all we can do tonight.
There's
good.
the school.
The
but
school budgets
we
are
don't
just a
know.
yes or a no.
Yep. And that's
And-
really town, I mean, I think you're gonna talk about that more on Wednesday as well. And then we'll have a better idea after capital meets on Thursday on the capital items.
And that meeting is posted for Wednesday for Scott and I?
Yes, it is.
Cool.
So that really just leaves you guys with a couple of line items here.
Yeah, tinier
Oh,
ones.
you could vote on Assabet. That is a firm number.
I move we recommend the Assabet assessment.
I'll second it.
And that's line item 95.
And again, it's a large increase also because the number of students going there, which is great, because I think I remember from my FinCom days, it was a dozen or so, and they said there was
40
44,
44?
37 to 44, right? 44 students at Assabet, so that is just great.
Yeah, and there's been more and more articles in the paper that more and more kids are starting to lean towards the vocational route, you know, which is wonderful. And there's just not enough schools to take care of those kids. So I will second that motion. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, line 95 is done. So yeah, that really leaves us with, oh, did we do animal control?
Yes.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, then the
Just
budget
public
for
hearing.
this evening is done.
Yeah,
So,
When you get a chance, you just share the link with the final, that column, whatever this select board column total is.
I can, it won't total up completely because
Right.
you have a few budgets that you haven't
I know.
voted on yet.
Yep.
But let me give you where you're at right now.
Well, because if I had a
Well-
spreadsheet, I could put some assumptions in those numbers and update my own spreadsheets to see if I hit the targets I wanted to try to hit.
Well,
Sure,
we'll
I
need that
can-
number anyways,
Yep.
You know what, I'll
or
move
that,
this onto the
Yep.
Google Drive
Yep.
right now.
yeah, put it on the Google Drive and then can you let, FinCom know that it's
Yep.
updated so that they're pulling up that one. So as everyone looks at
Oh,
it on
yeah.
their laptop, we're all in the
Yep.
same
I
one.
put theirs, the fresh one in the folder for Wednesday and moved the old ones into draft, so.
Okay. All right, so we are checking along and we are at old business to discuss some possible vote to place a Prop 2.5 override / debt exclusion on the town election ballot.
So we have to vote on this by next week at the latest, and I have a call tomorrow with our financial advisor. The tricky part is, as I mentioned in my overview, we have enough excess levy for the operating budget increase. The debt you really don't want to take, the capital you don't want to take out of the levy because that's a permanent increase. And those are one-time funds. So if we don't have sufficient free cash to fund the capital request, we would have to look at which items would be eligible for a debt exclusion. And there's a lot of, what's the word? Variables with that right now, depending on where capital goes, where our discussion goes with the schools on Wednesday. So it's very hard to say right now where we would go with that. But we do need to know by Monday because the town clerk needs to be notified 35 days in advance of the town
Right.
election. If it's going on the ballot.
I would not put it on the ballot. I wouldn't have a budget that goes over over our levy limit. I wouldn't put their items on debt exclusion. If we can't get to a budget within our overly generous levy limit, then, we'll do a July special election just for it with the only thing on the ballot, and we can have a townwide battle royale over, our taxes going up a huge amount or not.
And that's the other question I had is they're allowed to put the number they want on there and that would obligate us if it passes at town meeting to fund it. So if we don't have sufficient funds to fund it, I think we might have to put a debt exclusion on because we have to fund it somehow.
Mhm.
So that's part of the nuances that I'm gonna be working out tomorrow.
It would be interesting to see if at town meeting, a budget passes that is not fundable within our levy limit. And then we go to a town vote and they reject the increase in levy limit, what happens next? And I don't think we should spend a lot of time trying to figure that out. I'm hoping that we have a lot of money. We can raise taxes a significant amount of money and still be the levy. And we have other things to potentially fund capital with besides just free cash.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of an override either. If the school would like to present their budget on the floor as is, and there can be discussions behind them to explain what would happen if this passes, then obviously it is the vote of the town people that are there, and hopefully they will come out to understand and just let the discussions be. So, yeah, no, I'm not in favor of an override either.
I mean, let's put it this way, I'm at least a little bit more in favor of an override than a debt exclusion. I don't like debt exclusion. Debt exclusion is basically, again, allowing you to spend more money than you're legally allowed to. And I get that it's only a temporary thing where an override is a permanent thing, but I think we should stay within the levy limit.
I agree.
And I think all the capital should be within the levy limit.
Right, the only issue is the capital needs to come out of free cash. So we don't have sufficient free cash.
It does not need to come out of free cash. You could,
Or one of the stabilization,
or you could actually put it out of the levy.
right, but then that's a permanent increase to the school budget.
I don't know, you're saying the school budget in the life of the universe can never go down. It is not legally permissible to ever reduce a school budget.
No, but if you're taking it out of the operating budget and putting it in that regard, that you're not offsetting it with anything. So you're taking up that excess capacity. They would have to go down the following year.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
All right, so are you looking for a motion on that one, Kristen?
Can I do a little more research? I mean, if you want to take a motion now, that's fine, but I just want to make sure we're legally within our bounds to put something on that,
No, that's
knowing what I know right now and knowing how we feel right now, I would do a motion saying that we are not going to put a Prop 2.5% override or a debt exclusion on the town budget, on the town ballot.
And I will second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right,
May I ask one more clarifying question? So that would mean it does not go on the warrant either,
correct,
because
Correct.
it has to go on both. So
Correct.
Yes,
would you amend that motion to include the warrant then as well?
yes,
Thank you.
seconded
and in favored.
and in
Okay.
favored.
Thank you.
All right, which leads us right into more annual town meeting warrant fund to discuss and vote on the warrant.
So this is just another iteration of the warrant. It's in a better order at this time, and I am down an article. We did not end up having any sunset clauses that needed to be addressed on any articles. We do have some prior year bills, at least one, and I believe I have a couple other ones I'm waiting for. So I am now down to, I've played with these numbers so many times I have to check. Just closed on, sorry, hold on.
That's okay. I had the old one open from last week still.
Oh, yeah, this one looks a little bit better. We are down to a 26 article warrant, which is not too bad. I do still have some descriptions that I'm waiting for to come in. I have reached out to those groups that I am in need of descriptions from. I also did get a price today for that classification and compensation plan. That would be $9,900, right under the
Yeah.
little $10,000
Right.
threshold, I know. So that it doesn't have to be bid.
Keen
but-
Fire and Safety, didn't we have this problem last year? That seems to be the same thing we voted on last year.
Fire
They didn't-
extinguisher?
Is it?
Yes. Fire and
All
fire
right, let me check
inspections.
it out.
It just, if they're regularly not getting us a bill in time, then I think we have to find a new vendor. Or change when we do the fire, and so maybe we have to have the fires and extinguishers done in July 1, so they have an entire year, 14 months to get us a bill.
Okay.
All right, so do we want to start at the top and go down? So prior year expenses was the one that
Yep.
Scott just mentioned, Keen Fire and Safety for 862. Article 2 talks about free cash transfer to conservation, which is 41,000 and change, which is
Yep.
less than their normal 50 because they had to put back a little over $8,000 dollars. 3 is just repurpose funding for library capital, so we're just transferring 14 and change for that.
And I did confirm with Victoria today that that would be the library board of trustees that would present that article.
Psych.
Article 4, can't we do Article 4 through a reserve fund transfer this year? It's only a $6,000 or $7,000 item, wasn't it? The study?
This is for what the study recommends we
Yeah.
actually have to do in terms of monitoring wells and
Oh, so
sampling.
that we're removing this because this won't be ready for town meeting.
Oh, that's right.
Yep.
You are correct.
Yeah, because
apologies.
Board of Health said that they've got the 6 or 7 grand that
Yep.
they can do that with.
Yeah,
and
and we
then-
said that if they ran out of money, we would support a reserve fund transfer
Correct.
to not
Right.
have to have a warrant article on it.
All
This
right.
will be probably the reason why we have to have a fall
Fall
town
town
meeting, is that
meeting.
that one we'll probably have to do for all fund.
All right, so Article
25 warrant article.
There you go.
See?
Yep, hey, we're down there.
Yep.
So this one is the FY 26 capital improvement plan,
Which we don't have yet.
which we don't have yet. So we're gonna skippy-doo past that one. Next one, FY 26 operating budget override and or debt exclusion, which we just said,
Yep,
nope.
nope,
Removed.
so that
So
goes away.
6 comes off.
See?
Well, no, 6 has to stay because it is the budget, but the debt exclusion and override language will be
Yeah.
removed.
Yeah.
Okay. So half of 6 comes off. Article 7 is transfer funds to OPEB stabilization fund. We were gonna talk about that we weren't going to fund the whole thing, correct?
Yeah, that is, FinCom's gonna come up with a number
Okay,
that's not gonna be huge.
all right.
The current balance is 85,000.
Mhm.
You know, if we put another 10,000 or 15,000 every year, it'll be fine. And that's gonna come out of either free cash or that's gonna come out of free cash, right?
Yeah, so the free cash plan says 10%. So if you did it based on 1.2, it would be 120,000. But as you
Right.
said, we
don't
don't
have to
need
do
to really
that.
put that much in. So do you guys have a recommendation and then I
I
can pass
would,
it on?
I would make a recommendation to FinCom as a motion of $50,000 we add to that fund.
I'm okay with that. So half.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Article as it stands now, 8 to transfer funds to the general stabilization fund, but we.
I-
can't
I-
wait
That one
on-
I'm looking
Yep.
into to see
Right.
how much we
Yep.
have.
Right, and I would generally ask that to be pulled, and we just don't transfer into stabilization. We have more requests for free cash than we probably have as free cash. We have a fairly healthy stabilization fund. I think Article 8 is generally gonna go away.
Okay,
Although I'd wait till FinCom to make
Yep.
before pulling it, but that's, I think, the direction we're gonna try to go.
all right, and then Kristen, you just provided information on Article 9, which is the classification and compensation plan update, which is a wee bit under 10 grand.
Yep.
Article 10 is for building and vehicle maintenance and equipment. It's a special article. Those are all the unanticipated, this broke. I need to fix it, so we're looking at 30 grand for that,
Again, out of free cash.
out of
right?
free cash.
And the idea being that we put like 30 to 50 into it every year, and some years they'll take 10,000 repairs, but some
Yep.
years they'll take 100,000 repairs,
Correct.
and it stabilizes the tax rate. a little bit.
Exactly.
All right, Article 11 is to amend the revolving fund by law. Is this going to be a Board of Health one?
It is.
Yep.
So this is to allow payroll to be spent out of their revolving fund because right now they can only use it for expenses.
So they'll stand up and talk about it, correct? I'm assuming Board of Health. All right,
And when they do payroll, that's gonna include all the payroll costs associated with any person they do out of it, because they're trying to sneak a new employee into the,
They're trying to increase hours, not add an employee.
okay.
Article 12, establish revolving fund annual spending limits. We have several.
Yep, that's a standard one every
These are
year.
these are the same limits as last year. I haven't had anyone request an increase or decrease, so I'm going with that.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, and my favorite, Article 13,
Peg
peg
spending.
spending.
Well, I get to introduce it this year, so.
If it's on the second night, yes, you can. Can you just point towards the west and put it out there? That would be awesome. Article 14 is community preservation, so they will stand up.
Right, and that's just them just moving money
Yep.
around, not actually spending anything. Well, they,
Correct.
Setting their budget.
setting their budget, right?
So that's-
Straight up expenses.
Article 14, 15, 16, 17.
Right, or all their capital projects.
Correct.
We're in chart, since likely me, then, present for the stair design on 17.
Okay.
I did actually
Oh,
ask
that's
for a copy of the application, which I got today, that the 1870 committee put in, so I can pull that language into the
Okay.
warrant,
Okay.
so.
All right, so Article 18, and then the two after that, this is the appointed town clerk, appointed constable, and appointed trust of trustees to move them from elected to appointed.
Possibly night two, that's where the
Yeah,
financial
so
articles end.
That's where the financial article, and as we shrink the total number of articles, I think we should be prepared for 2 nights. But if there's not a lot of debate around the budget, and we could even still have some time for the schools in
Mhm.
there, you could get through it relatively fast.
Mhm.
And so I don't, at one point I was thinking that like whether or not we could get through all the financial ones in one night and draw a line. I think we do our normal, we go to 11 and 11, we take a vote seeing where we're at.
Yep.
But I still think the 3 bylaw ones are gonna take
Sometime.
some time.
Yeah, I mean, so for all the appointed ones, we just need to make clear to everybody that this does not take effect July 1,
Right,
type of thing, that there is work to be done on them, but at least with the town approval, it allows us to move forward to do something.
and this also has to be on the ballot, correct?
Yes, it does.
Yep.
And
So
it
vote-
is already.
Okay,
It already has been requested to
Right.
go on the ballot. Actually, I think that would be helpful if you could take a formal vote to ask the
Yeah.
town clerk to place those 3 articles on the ballot.
I would move that we ask to place on the ballot appointing a town clerk, appointing a constables, and appointing trustee of trusts.
I second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And again, these 3 are designed to potentially simplify and shrink the government, just like the town a tiny bit. At least the town clerk job is not going away at all. But it's becoming more and more appointed in other towns and putting us in that line. The constable and appointed trustee will probably find existing employees or bodies to take on those roles so that just fewer needs.
And that was one of the things too. I was going to ask for a little bit of help with the description in terms of what the thought process was behind those. So
Mhm.
I can add that in. If you have anything else that you would want to write up for an explanation, that would, a couple sentences would be really helpful.
Okay.
I'll pester me about that.
I will pester you.
All right, Article 21, which is a special legislation to move us to a 5-member select board. And again, the key thing is that it's not going to take effect on July 1. It's not going to immediately impact upcoming, seats that are available. This is as we've seen with other towns of Lancaster, and there was another one, was it Sterling? It's a couple years that they have to work on their items, but the nice thing is that they went first and we can borrow some of
Yep.
their stuff. But without the support of the town to move to a 5-member board, no work will continue.
And we saw the potential could have happened tonight had I got paged for work and had to leave quickly.
Correct.
And with Chris's position vacant,
I
the
would-
meeting
I
is
would gone
over.
home. Yeah,
And we had a lot of things that had to get done tonight.
correct. All right, and Kristen, there's articles and stuff that I've pulled up. I can send them along. If it
Great.
does go to one night, I'm happy to take that one and,
Okay.
Yep.
cite stuff.
Yeah, and the description needs to explain it and
Yes.
explain the reasoning, but be neutral, because it can't be like a pros and cons kind of
Correct.
argument, more just descriptive. So
As to why, yep.
Yep.
Yep. Next one is Article 22.
Do you want to take the write-up of 21? If I'll take the sort of write-up of, what is that, 18, 19, and 20?
and you get 22 too, Scott. It's the
Yeah.
housing. I realize that my language says housing trust and legal counsel likely have to improve on the wording. That was part of
Yeah.
my description.
Nice.
So
Nice.
I'll work. There are definitely people in the Housing Trust who are more eloquent with words than I am.
excellent.
And Article 23, you're missing an A there, Kristen. It's Article,
Oh, that got cut off. Okay.
is the earth removal bylaw that can has been kicked down the road for multiple years,
Yes,
as we
it
can see that
has.
it was amended in 2020. And again, it's, the whole purpose was done because words in one document would contradict words in another document. So now we will have one document that talks about earth removal and importation.
Do we get clarification whether or not Board of Health wanted to do this instead of us?
Not yet. I did reach out to both Board of Health and Planning, and actually put them on an email together, hoping to have a bit of a discussion, but I have not heard back yet.
Alright.
I'm assuming they want to discuss this with
Mhm.
their respective boards at
Yep.
their next meeting.
At some point, this has to go to print, and I think we'll go to print with Select Board with the idea that we might on the floor of town meeting
Amend
Pass it
it.
over.
may
Yep.
do it, well, not pass out, do a friendly amendment to change Select Board to Board of
Whoever.
Health or Planning Board or whoever else is sort of more appropriate.
And I did reach out to Weston and Sampson. They do have experience with making some of the technical recommendations, and they are happy to help us with this.
Good.
And it'll be the same rate that we use for the soil importation reviews.
And so the Select Board role then is we have to figure out if 100 or 1,000 or 10,000, what is the,
What does that
Yeah.
mean?
what is the right number? And we have to
Well-
decide that in the next week or two.
They're gonna make a recommendation on it, and then
Okay.
with a justification, and you guys can decide if you feel comfortable with it.
Well, and I think you need examples too. If you tell me 10,000 cubic feet, I don't know what that
Right.
means. Does that mean a driveway? Or does that mean a parking lot? Or does that mean so I
Right.
think you need to give people a visual, because I just see a truck with stuff.
I actually put several pickup trucks full in there, as I know that's like an odd descriptor, but somebody said that, and I put that in there because I was like, that's the difference between 18 wheelers coming in with large amounts. So, you're, whatever that works out to, I kind of
Right.
gave them a little guide.
And I think if we were looking at this a couple of years ago, we might have ended up having to have a higher number when we were thinking of it, like Highland Commons, and there were large commercial projects that we're actively trying to do in town. And so I think we wanted as a smaller number that would allow a homeowner or a farm to do some work to improve their property if they want, but not have them sort of change the landscape of town
Right.
in any substantial way.
I know we did discuss possibly meeting March 31st. I don't know if you were both available, if just to go finalize the warrant, that
Mm.
might
Yeah.
be helpful.
I had planned it.
I've planned that that's
Yeah,
gonna
I
be
had
it.
planned all of March to be here.
Okay, great. That gives us 2 more meetings.
Yep.
That would be helpful.
All right, Article 24 is the ADU.
Yep.
That's the accessory dwelling unit, acronym, which would be a planning board.
Yep.
Chit chat.
And they just sent me over some language today on the description for that and floodplain bylaw, so I will get that in.
And, oh, yep, there's Article 25 for the floodplain. Yeah, that
Yep.
too, floodplain. And I'm scrolling and I'm scrolling, and Article
Article
26
26
is the end. It is the annual town election.
And I need to remove the Prop 2.5, and
Yep.
Prop 2.5 questions if voted.
Right.
Yep. So that concludes.
And so, I mean, we've had several years where we've had 40 plus. This is 26. Now it has 3 contentious, potentially bylaw stuff that if we do some work and we ask planning and others to do, actually it's probably us to do some outreach on it so we can do stuff. I think the budget, will have some time on the school side of it. I don't think you and I have done such drastic stuff that people are going to be trying to undo a bunch of stuff. I have to decide how much I might decide on a line item or 2 to fight on the floor, but that's a personal decision. I could just fill the energy of the room at some point for some of those.
And again, for complete visibility, obviously I will be there on May 5th. If we go to a 2-night town meeting, I am out of the state. So it will be the Scott Show if we go to that.
Make up for me missing special town meetings.
Oh, that was fun. You should see the
There.
steps that you get in, getting up and down. All right, and actually our last new business item and last item for the evening is to discuss and possible vote on long-term rental of the 1870 Town Hall with fees. So take it away.
This is really interesting. We do, and some of this is being kept under wraps at this time, so I can't speak
Mhm.
too much
That's
to
fine.
who, what, where, when, why on the actual production. But we have been approached by a Hollywood production company that loves the 1870 Town Hall. I actually asked them if they wanted to buy it, but I got a no. So I got a good chuckle though. And they possibly want to rent it from anywhere between 1 to 3 months. So we went back and looked at our permit fees for filming and also use fees for 1870. They are really designed for one-time
Yeah.
rentals, because when we did the math out, if they wanted to rent it for a month, it came out to about $75,000. Because the film fee has film, parking, trailers, costs for shutting down roads, it's $650 for every 4 hours that you're in there. So what Dee and I sat down and looked at kind of revenue, because we would potentially have to kick people out, as we talked about. I think, or I don't know if we talked about this previously. I've been talking about it a lot lately in my head. And so if we had to shut it down and relocate folks to other building, that is a loss of revenue potentially there. So what would actually be reasonable? We did actually try to float the 50 to 75,000 a month, because I thought, well, hey, that is what our fees are. And unfortunately, that was I'm
Yeah.
really sorry, we would actually have to go somewhere else.
No,
And they
no.
want to work with us.
Yep.
And they basically said, come back to us with a better price. So what we landed on was something more like $20,000 a month. And my proposal was to try to do that. If they want to go for 3 months, potentially reduce it to a flat $50,000 and see if we could get anything from there. Again, it's a negotiation, right? So they won't tell me exactly what they're willing to pay.
Right.
They say, give me a number and we'll tell you if it's too much.
Well, whoever blinks first loses. So, with that, and for events that are in there, I'm sure there's something that we could come up with to either refund, Scott's having a
Relocate.
party, that we refund his party, or we say, hey, why don't you
Yeah.
have another party? And we won't charge you,
Right.
type. So I think that there's things that you can work out. And there's gonna be enough notice. It's not like, so sorry, too bad you have an event on Friday and it's Thursday, get out.
No, and
Yeah.
there are some events that Sandra has already said there's absolutely no other place that these folks could go, so we would need to work around
Yeah.
this. And they were totally open to working with, they were very easy to work with, very easy to talk to. It was like the day Hollywood came to town.
Yep.
So if you're amenable to that, I mean, if we could bring in $50,000 for the
Right.
town, that would be tremendous.
Well, and I think having in some of those circles, having a reputation of a place that's willing to negotiate and
Yep.
figure out something to do will potentially bring in other revenues as well.
Right,
So I have a rental in the next several months. And so is it a conflict of interest that this could actually negatively impact me?
oh. Um,
Yeah.
I just have to be clear so we don't get any sort of state conflict of interest sort of stuff. That I have rented 1870 Town Hall
it's your
for
decision,
an
no.
event.
Um,
Now, since I don't know the dates this is covered and you don't know the date of my event, we have no
Correct.
idea whether or not I'm impacted by
I
it.
don't know that
Right.
information. I don't actually know the dates yet.
Right.
So,
And since I also think I'm not trying to stop it. And so it could be more of a conflict if I was trying to stop it so I could still hold my event.
I think
the
if
date I
you
want, but-
disclose,
Right.
because what you're dealing with is more of the appearance of impropriety,
right.
you're not making money, but
Right.
through this
Neither
decision.
my event is not making money. The event is costing me money. So it's not a money-making venture for me. And I'm generally in favor of finding flexibility that gets 1870 Town Hall more used. I think it will cause buzz in town. It will make more people in town want to use it at some point.
Yes.
And would potentially fill some revolving funds that could be used potentially
Mm-hmm.
to continue to do improvements in the building.
They also said that this is basically, they want to use it as their anchor location, which in Hollywood speak means their prime spot, I guess. And so they will be looking at other places in Berlin to film because they don't like to go far.
Mhm.
They've asked us about potential other spaces like the library. They've talked to 19 Carter. So this could actually be something really cool for the town. And apparently we don't do pilots anymore. That's old TV speak. They get booked for a block of shows. If the first block gets picked up, then they move, so they film blocks 1 and 2. If block 1 gets picked up, they film block 3. If the whole series gets picked up, this is a series, they would be back here more regularly. So I think
Yeah.
we do want to work with them.
Yes.
Sandra was involved. She understands the scheduling concerns, but you know, they were scouting other potential locations in
Yep.
town. We were like, do you need any farms? You need whatever you need. I mean, we're like, we can show you some places. So I think it would be a really neat thing. The one thing to point out though is at least, I think he said a few times, there would have to be a temporary road closure on 62 that they would have to work out with the police. And we did have both the chiefs there to talk about that too. But for 50 grand, if we could make it somewhere
Well-
around there, that I think is
Yeah,
okay.
and I think what our motion today is as much to authorize you to figure out if there's an agreement that could work for everybody.
Yes.
Mhm.
And I'm fine to do a motion of, work out what you think is best for the town. I think the final thing has to come back to us, but know that we're open to the numbers and the flexibility you're talking about.
Okay.
I'll second that motion. All in favor?
Aye,
All right.
Thank
so
you.
I defy Dee will have fun putting that into a formal motion.
You realize she's sitting at home right now, not saying not nice things about
I
every one
gotta
of
tell
us.
you, Dee has been taking the lead on this and she's doing a phenomenal job and she's having a great time. So it's really been exciting.
Great. All right, well, you know what? We've closed everything out. I don't think there's any more questions. I already gave my liaison spiel.
Yeah,
Scott, you got anything?
I'm pulling up my notes, sorry. The problem with posting something online, of course, is that people will stop and talk to you about all kinds of different things.
Mhm.
Fair.
Um, we put salt down on the roads, not brine, right?
I don't know what the chemical is.
Right,
I'd have to check with Fred. I don't know exactly what it's called.
okay. I didn't believe our highway department had brining equipment, and it looks like on at least one of the roads in town that there's been brining equipment going up and down it for snowstorms. And I'm sure that's not permitted, but I wouldn't stop someone from trying to help the town necessarily. But I'd love to know more about whether or not some better snow and salt makes a great MVP grant.
Oh, okay.
At the school board meeting, the administration, several times when they were presenting the budget, pointed out that lack of clarity in the regional agreement
Mhm.
makes doing some of the budgeting numbers hard. Just like the town administrator bylaw, the agreement was written before there was a region. The region's now been around for a while.
Right.
And I think we should have a conversation about what the process is to formally opening up conversations. I think the town has a list of things. I bet
Mhm.
wouldn't be surprised if the other town has a list, and as friends of the school has one. And that basically interested, I'm also interested sort of who is party to those conversations and whose approval is needed
Mhm.
to change the agreement.
Right, so DESI has actually asked us to do
Yeah, in that
this.
letter, yeah.
They sent us a formal letter and Al did forward it and said, look forward to having these conversations with both Berlin and Boylston.
Clearly after budget season.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's an important conversation we need to.
So how much the administration is around, or even the school boards around during the summer months to have it, because once school gets back in, they're busy again with school stuff.
This is true.
Anything else?
The developer for Berlin Sand and Gravel,
Yes.
there's a big complicated thing in there. I wonder, I sort of hear from residents here and there what's going in there, and I think, know they presented, but whether or not as a significant development, they should be invited to come here and
Yeah.
do a little bit of a dog and pony show.
Okay.
I expect it to be a relatively friendly, I don't have any sort of gotcha questions. I just, if
Yeah.
I'm being stopped on the street, I'd love to be able to know more and be able to say what is in the good old town we live in,
I
what
know.
is real and what is not real.
Correct.
And for me to be able to say,
Sure.
instead of I heard it from this other
Yes.
committee, I heard it firsthand would be better.
They also did have a hearing before the planning board
Mhm.
and they invited residents to that
Yep.
hearing that shared some concerns. So that's on YouTube and I will ask for the contact information and see if we can invite them to a
Okay.
upcoming meeting.
Yes. Yes, because unchecked fiction becomes fact.
Yes,
Sure does.
that's enough of that list for tonight.
All right. Well, seeing that we don't have anything else, so I'll see you on Wednesday.
Yes,
And we will have another select board meeting in a week on the 24th, but I will take a motion to go.
motion to adjourn.
And I second that. And all in favor?
Aye,
Thank you. Have a
thanks.
good night.
Thank-
Okay, give me a minute to log off.
Stop